Okay. Thank you, everyone, for coming to our first meeting of 2023, which is super exciting. First order of business is to call roll and establish a quorum.
Dr. Solocito? Here. Ms. Bowler?
Here.
Ms. Laredo?
Here.
Dr. Noland?
Here.
Ms. Prado?
Here.
Ms. Berber? Dr. Bradbury?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Great. It's nice to see some of you in person for the first time in a long time. Yeah. So the second order of business on the agenda is public comment on items not on the agenda. Just remember that we're not allowed to discuss or take action on any matter raised during the public comment section, except to decide whether to place the matter on the agenda of a future meeting. So don't be discouraged if we are not responding to your comments. Is there anyone in the room who has any public comments?
Good morning, Dan Baxter with the CVMA. You know, people don't express their gratitude and appreciation enough, and I'd like to express mine. The work that the Equine Practice Subcommittee has done over the last few months and the work that the MDC did yesterday was tremendous, really, really good. And frankly, the discussion that we had yesterday on the definition of client and the way that that was handled is just a good microcosm of how diligent and how productive the group has been. So on behalf of the CVMA, I want to express my gratitude to the MDC and to that subcommittee for its great work. The other item of gratitude I'd like to express is something that's actually been going on for quite a long time, but I don't know if it gets the credit and the attention it deserves, and that's the very steady, very consistent presence of the Veterinary Medical Board at our board meetings, the CVMA board meetings. We had one of those meetings over the weekend, and Ms. Seiferman and Dr. Bradbury both attended, and it's great to have that connection. And we know that we have meetings all over the state. You're always there. You're there in person, and we really appreciate the heck out of that. So I just wanted to take that moment before we get into the fray of this meeting and just let you know that it's all very appreciated. So thank you.
Seeing no other comments in the room, moderator, can you open it up to the public, please?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment for items not on the agenda, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen or use the raise hand function. And audio-only participants can raise their hand by pressing *3 on their device. I'll go ahead and pause a moment to allow the public time to access these features and submit their requests. All right, now it looks like we have a request for comment from Paul McLennan. And Paul, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak and a 15-second warning. Please click the Unmute Me button when the prompt appears on your device.
Good morning. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk this morning. I also sat in on the meeting yesterday, and I had a couple of comments about what I took away from the meeting yesterday, the parts that I was able to attend. I don't really see that there's been a detailed study or groundwork that's been shared on what the current equine practices are relating to the business activities as it regards clients, trainers, agents, and whatnot. And there may have been this, but I have come late into this discussion. But what I took away from the discussion is that the board may not have a thorough understanding of the current business arrangements that are involved in the delivery of veterinary medicine for equine practitioners in the state. And it seems like some of this seems to be very narrowly centered around racetrack practice. And that excludes thousands of other veterinarians who work here. And I would hate for it'd be very unfortunate if those rules become narrowly applied to that business arrangement. And I also think that there are some assumptions that appeared raised yesterday that I'm not sure that I would agree with, and I would wonder how they came to be. And one of them is that the statement that horse owners are unaware of what their designated trainer, agents, clients, and handlers are doing with their horses, and if they knew, they would not they're somehow being harmed by this. And I don't really see the evidence in practice of this assumption. And I would need definitely some clarification or some evidence for this stated assumption. The other assumption that I came away with is that trainers are telling veterinarians how to treat horses.
15 seconds.
And I would just say that if we don't have the right assumptions on which to make rules going forward, it's going to come out as inadequate. I don't want this critique of the work so far to be a denial that change is necessary. In 4 decades of being a private practice veterinarian, employing other veterinarians and RVTs, I embrace change, but I embrace it with a very knowledgeable, directed course based on good information. And I just am worried a little bit that we don't have that at this point in the equine practice subcommittee. Thank you.
All right, this is the moderator. Appears there are no further requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Okay, it looks like we are moving on to the next order of business, which is the minutes from our October 19th, 20th meeting.
So members, we did receive a request from the public to include additional statements that, as part of Dr. Nolan's update from the Access to Care discussion. Specifically, Karen Atlas had asked for a section to be added to the minutes, and so Jeff will pull that up so you guys can see. Our team did go back to the webcast to verify that this is what was actually said. Jeff, are you able to blow it up a little bit so they can see what it is added?
I know. Is there any way to get the screen behind us too?
That was some of the technical difficulties.
Okay.
Perhaps, so you guys don't have this because it was sent after we had these posted. If you're able to see it, Tim, on your screen, can you go ahead and read it so the members know what it says?
Yes, this was a comment regarding the letter from Karen Atlas and the APTC. We modified this to say the board's receipt of a letter from Karen Atlas and APTC with Dr. Nolan making the following remarks. We appreciate their continued input. We also want to assure them that we are ready to work with them regarding the legislation they are seeking when it has been reintroduced. The board has devoted a great deal of time to this important issue, but I think at this point we agree with the coalition that the issue of dual jurisdiction across 2 boards is going to require a legislative action. We do not intend to cherry pick, but we are ready and willing to discuss the legislation on this topic when it is introduced.
I'm sorry, I'm confused. Is that from supposed to be what Dr. Nolan said? And is that from the recording?
Yes, that was from the recording that during that agenda item.
Okay, and you guys listened
We
to
verified that, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
One more edit that I had, Jeff, if you could scroll to page 21 of 46, and at the bottom, It says the board revised the proposed amendments to BPC section 4846. That should actually say 4861.
Okay, I had a couple. So on page 10, after Dr. Bradbury agreed with Ms. Seiferman's assessment, the line where it says student does not inform the supervising veterinary, I think that should be veterinarian. And then on page 14, Dr. Payton's name is misspelled and should be spelled Jamie, and the last name should be spelled Peyton, and it's misspelled again in the second sentence of that paragraph under C, overview of October 18, 2022 MDC meeting. And then these are really minor. On page, oh gosh, what page is this? 29, first sentence says materials that it are, I think we just remove it. And at I think there's, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The ninth line down, it says Mr. Baxter's, plural, asked what the problem with using the word. I think we just have to remove the apostrophe S, so just some editing things there. And that's all I have. Anyone else? I don't see anybody's hand up. It's kind of a weird, just so you guys know up there or out there on WebEx, it's hard for me to see the screen. So if you have something that you want to say and I haven't called on you, please feel free to kind of chime in, but I don't see anybody there. Okay, so do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to adopt the amendments adopt the minutes with the amendments discussed. I'll go ahead and second that.
Okay, with the motion in a second, is there any public comments? Seeing none in the room, can we open it up for public comment on WebEx, please?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I have opened up the Q&A panel for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or use the raise hand function. And for audio-only participants, you can raise your hand by pressing *3 on your device. I'll pause a moment to allow the public time to access these features and submit their requests. All right, and seeing none, would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Thank you. With that, I guess we will call a vote.
Dr. Solocito?
Yes.
Ms. Buller?
Yes.
Ms. Laredo?
Yes.
Dr. Noland?
Aye.
Ms. Prado?
Yes.
Ms. Berber?
Yes.
Dr. Bradbury?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, so next up is a report and update from the Department of Consumer Affairs.
Good morning. Hello. Good morning. So I will be doing the DCA update this morning, and just want to say hello and good morning, Executive Officers
Seiferman, President Bradbury, Vice President Solicito, and members of the board. Happy New Year, and thank you for allowing me an opportunity to provide the Department of Consumer Affairs update today. I'm Melissa Geer, Deputy Director for Board and Bureau Relations, and since my update in October, we've added some new DCA staff. First, I'm excited to announce that the Governor appointed Yvonne Durantes as the new Assistant Deputy Director of Board and Bureau Relations, who most recently worked for the California Office of Emergency Services, or Cal-OES. I'm also pleased to announce the appointment of Kathleen Nichols as Chief of the Division of Investigation. She was sworn in on December 5th, and Ms. Nichols has extensive law enforcement experience with over 26 years of investigating and supervisory experience. The department has begun the process to fill the Deputy Chief position in the Health Quality Investigation Unit. Also, since that time, the department established its first Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Steering Committee, or DEI committee, to guide the department's equity strategy, initiatives, and action plans. The DEI committee held its official kickoff meeting on November 9th, and its second meeting will be held this Friday, January 27th. Additional resources will be forthcoming that the boards will be able to use and incorporate into their strategic plans, recruitment processes, and et cetera. The committee will concentrate on 3 key areas: workforce, to find and keep diverse talent; workplace, to actively educate leaders and employees to raise awareness and foster an inclusive culture; marketplace, to be sensitive to the diverse backgrounds and perspectives of consumers, applicants, and licensees; to more effectively advance equity and drive outcomes that increase opportunity for all. Strategic plans for July 2023 and beyond must be developed or updated in accordance with Governor Gavin Newsom's executive order. DCA is revising its strategic planning processes to include more inclusive public engagement, data analysis, and the incorporation of DEI into strategic planning. The DEI committee will provide input to the strategic planning processes in the coming months. DCA will be implementing the revised processes and working with boards and updating existing strategic plans or developing new ones by March 2023. DCA has also released its new strategic plan in November, and we officially transitioned to a new logo on January 3rd, 2023. The new logo will be implemented gradually throughout 2023, and existing items with the previous DCA logo are still valid during the transition and do not need to be replaced or updated. DCA board and bureau leadership have been given information and resources to help with the new logo's implementation. A centralized website is also available. The new plan and logo represent the department's next chapter and future, with consumer protection continuing to guide our mission and priorities. DCA holds itself to a high standard as a licensing entity, regulator, educator, and service provider. Additionally, the plan incorporates our strong commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as our shared commitment to each and every consumer. The new logo not only displays our state's official colors, but it visually represents the DCA's vision, together protecting California consumers. The shield symbolizes DCA's strong and longstanding protection mandate. This state symbolizes all 40 million Californians DCA has pledged and is honored to serve, and the star symbolizes consumer protection as DCA's true guiding principle. It's our own North Star. If you have any questions, please contact me. Next up, I will share a few reminders about travel and required trainings. Board member travel. As travel resumes, keep in mind that all state travel arrangements must be made through DCA's authorized travel agency, Cal Travel Store, or Concur. When traveling by air and official state business, all board members and staff must use the most economical fares possible. Typically, this is the Southwest Wanna Get Away option. However, if the flight is changed, there may be additional charges. Flight changes for personal convenience are not permitted or justified, and the traveler is responsible for any associated charges. Please contact BBR if you have any travel questions. Required board member training reminder. Also, now is the time to go over all the necessary board member trainings and submit your certificates of completion to your executive officer and DCA. Board members must complete board member orientation training or BMONT within the first year of appointment or reappointment. Ethics training within 6 months of appointment and every 2 years thereafter. Sexual harassment prevention within the first year and every 2 years thereafter. And defensive driver training within the first year and every 4 years. For your convenience, these trainings are offered multiple times a year in a variety of formats. For more information, a mandatory trainings page has been created to help members identify, access, and track specified trainings. The page includes direct links to mandatory trainings as well as pertinent information and policies specific to these trainings. The page is also available via the DCA Board Member Resource Centers page under Required Board Members Trainings. And lastly, we'll look ahead at a few important dates that are fast approaching. President's Training is February 22nd, 2023. DCA invites presidents and vice presidents to our President's Training on February 22nd, 2023, from 10 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. This virtual 2-hour-ish training will outline the role of a board president, including understanding the scope of the role, managing board members, and performing administrative duties. More information will be available soon. Also, please note the end of COVID-19 state of emergency waivers will be February 28th, 2023. The state of emergency and associated executive orders will end on February 28th, 2023. Upon the state of emergency ending, active waivers that were issued under the authority of the state of emergency and executive orders will also expire. Thank you for your dedicated service throughout the pandemic. Next, board and committee members are required to file a Statement of Economic Interest, or Form 700, within 30 days of their appointment, annually, and within 30 days of leaving office. This year's annual filing period covers the prior calendar year, which is January 1st, 2022 through December 31st. The deadline for filing is Friday, April 1st, 2023. To ensure compliance, DCA requests that Form 700 filers complete their e-filing by Friday, March 15th, 2023. You should have recently received an email from NetFile with instructions on how to file your annual Form 700. If you have any questions or would like more information, please contact me. And we're almost done. Lastly, an update on BMONT, which will be March 22nd, 2023. Board members, again, must complete BMONT within 1 year of their appointment or reappointment. On March 22nd, 2023, BMONT will be offered as a live virtual day of training and possibly in person on June 20th and October 10th. More information will be available soon. Members can sign up using DCA's Learning Management System, or LMS. And thank you again for this opportunity. DCA and the BBR team look forward to working with you and assisting you throughout this new year. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Any comments or questions from the board?
I just wanted to comment with regards to the DEI. I think it's really important that it is being, I guess, part of all government agencies to be involved, because we know that systemic disparities in race, gender, and everything else, exist. And I think with regard to the veterinary profession, that's also something that we really need to look into. Thank you.
I don't see any hands up in the board members. Any public comment? There's none in the room. Moderator, can you open it up for public comment, please?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon, located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or use the raise hand function. And audio-only participants can raise their hand by pressing *3 on their device. Go ahead and pause a moment to allow the public time to access these features and submit their requests. All right, and seeing none, would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Okay, so next up, thank you again. Yeah, next up we have an update and discussion regarding Assembly Bill 1282.
Yep.
And I think we have, is Dr. Brady here?
Yeah.
Oh, there he is. Hi.
So just a quick introduction on the topic, members. This was AB 1282, which is formerly called the California Pet Blood Bank Modernization Act. And as part of AB 1282, CDFA was charged with making guidance, a community animal blood banking guidance resource document. And when they're developing that, they're required to work with the Veterinary Medical Board and other stakeholders. The board delegated this to the MDC to provide that feedback to CDFA. Dr. Brady came to our MDC meeting in October, and we provided feedback, and subsequent to that, Dr. Bradbury provided more feedback in writing. And so what you have now in the attachment is the final, close to final draft from CDFA, the most recent draft. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Brady to present on it, and then if you have any feedback, feel free to provide it.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. As Jessica said, my name is Sean Brady. I'm a veterinarian with the California Department of Food and Agriculture, where I manage the Animal Blood Banks program. As we just discussed, in 2022, AB 1282 went into effect, which with the goal of transitioning the state from closed colony animal blood banks to community-based animal blood banks. And as part of that effort, we are creating that animal blood bank guidance resource to provide best management practices for animal blood banks. In creating our document, we've worked with technical experts from academia, industry, government, and nonprofit organizations to provide best practices regarding animal donor qualification, selection, and screening, bloodborne pathogen testing, safe product handling, processing, labeling, and storage. We've gone through numerous revisions and edits, and I do believe we are close to a finalized document, and I'm here today to solicit any additional feedback before we finalize and publish that document on our Animal Blood Bank Program website.
Yeah, so we asked Dr. Brady to come here because it is such an important topic, and we really only saw it through the MDC. So thank you for coming again. I really appreciate that. I am just really impressed with the work that went into this. It's a very complex topic, and I really appreciate all the work you and your team has done. After you guys have read it, is there any additional comments? Dr. Nolan.
Yes, thank you. I think it's really a great document. I really appreciate all the hard work in it. I did, when I was reading it, for instance, under Roman numeral 4, general instructions, I think you do a great job of defining commercial blood bank and community blood bank and whatnot. But then it seems like I feel like the first paragraph says commercial blood banks, and then it says animal blood banks, which isn't really in your definition. So I felt like if you could kind of stick to the same definitions as you go through, it would be, I think, even more clear.
Okay.
That's just a thought. And as you run through the document, you'll see several places where it kind of jumps back and forth, and yet I think your goal is that it's all the animal blood banks fall under the FDA regulations, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. So that's just my comment on that.
No, thank you. I'll take that into consideration and reread it and try to make that more clear and consistent.
Thank you very much, and thank you for this again. Excuse me.
I cannot recall, I just wanted to clarify the timing. The published date is in March 2023.
That's correct.
And then it's there for public comment? I don't remember what the
Yeah, we're required to
for.
have it available in March of 2023. There's not much beyond that for requirements. I think, in my view, it's sort of a document that can be updated going forward as we get additional comments. And we know that animal blood banking is an area where there's a lot of research and additional recommendations coming out. So I think we will continue to update with best practices as industry evolves.
Timing of implementation, I should have refreshed my memory before this, but as far as veterinary practices, private, collection, et cetera, different than what is being done now in the community setting, that's starting right away?
Yeah, at this point, community animal blood banks are allowed to register products with the California Department of Food and Agriculture. And then there's specific language on the trigger point of when we will discontinue our licensing program for closed colony animal blood banks. And it's based on quarterly reporting numbers that are submitted to our program.
Right. I remembered the threshold,
okay.
And that makes a lot of sense for the protection of the public and,
right.
and the pets. I just couldn't remember the timing of when these things were actually opening. Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, with regards to the implementation, if you could just describe how do we actually get this information to those, like the practitioners, like maybe in like rural areas, and are we going to be doing some outreach to make sure that it's not just a document that is on the website for people to access, but actually engaging people and entertaining concerns?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's an area we're going to be focusing on once we have this all finalized, is trying to get this information out there. I have scheduled some webinars with CVMA to talk with veterinarians to make them aware of this document and the changes and how they can go about starting a community animal blood bank. We're looking into other areas of outreach as well, whether that's attending conferences or just finding ways to get this information to the people that are most likely to be starting an animal blood bank, and that's an ongoing effort on our part.
Dr. Brady, we can partner with you in that too. We can look at doing more dissemination to all of our licensees and maybe doing some webinars as well.
That would be excellent, and yeah, I think that's an area we can partner with going forward. Particularly once this is all finalized and published, I want to make sure that we are giving a consistent message.
Any other comments? Yes, Dr. Nolan?
More of a question.
Yeah.
As you go down to, I think it's 8, 9, 11 sale of products and quarterly reporting. So if you have a veterinary hospital and you have your in-house blood donor that is usually our own dogs that are willing donors, and you use that blood for your own clientele, you still are required then to register or to get a license and to do a quarterly report, or is this just if you sell to other veterinarians?
Yes, CDFA is only involved with products that are commercially sold to other veterinarians.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, because we are usually selling the blood product, because of the cost of collecting the blood, but not to another veterinarian or another hospital. Is that correct?
That's correct. I believe offering the product for transfusion is considered a service at this point.
Yeah. Question. Is it, and this may have been answered before, and it doesn't go in regards to like this document, which thank you, is this blood being able to be provided to shelters, to animal shelters? Or is that, no, or am I now asking something that's like, oh my gosh, am I opening up a can of worms that hasn't been asked before? Like this.
Sorry, can you clarify the question?
Yeah, these blood banks. So I know that we're selling the blood's going to be sold to private veterinarians to be able to use in their practices. Has this been contemplated that the blood that we're grabbing from these blood banks would be provided to veterinary, to animal shelters that need blood for any type of activities in the animal shelters?
I believe the blood would be available to any veterinarian that needs it for transfusion medicine purposes.
Okay, and we don't know if that'd be sold or not.
Yeah.
It would be sold to the animal shelters, to the veterinarians in the animal shelters.
Correct.
Okay.
I don't see any hands up there, so I did just want to, I was wondering if maybe we would want to think about having like annual updates with the board, just to kind of see where we're at, since this is a period of transition, and right now we have a blood shortage, I know that, so it'd be interesting just to see how things go. Maybe we'll see you here next year.
Yes, I'd be happy to come whenever you want to invite me and discuss further, since it's an area where we're working together relatively frequently.
Great, and you just let us know what we can do to help.
Absolutely.
I don't think there's oh yeah.
That just brought me to a question, particularly from the consumer perspective. As this program rolls out and more, hopefully, veterinarians take the opportunity to do this, and it becomes and they recruit donors, donor dogs or donor cats, whatever, or donor dogs, I guess. Will CDFA be reporting in a public way what the volume is? Is it quarterly? Is it at your board? You don't have board meetings, but at your meetings, will it be obvious how we're going up the measurement to see how successful? Hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. We have created the program website where we plan to publish the quarterly report documents so that you can see totals from community-based and close colony. And actually, the 2022 totals are now available on our program website.
Okay, it doesn't look like there's any action that needs to be done here, so I'll open it up to public comment in the room. Not seeing anyone rushing to the front. Moderator, can you please open it up to the public on WebEx?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or use the raise hand function. And it does look like we have a couple individuals who have requested public comment, so go in the order that they were received. First, we have Judy Mancuso. And Judy, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak and a 15-second warning. Please click the unmute me button when the prompt appears on your device.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Dr. Brady, for all your hard work on this. My group, Social Compassion and Legislation, was a co-sponsor of this legislation for 4 years. We tried getting it done, and during that period, every time I went to my personal vets, they would always check in with me. When's that thing going to happen? We need blood. And there was so much interest in the veterinary community in doing a commercial type blood bank at their facility. So I think that getting the word out to the veterinary community is really mission critical, because so many wanted to participate. And I know that if I could get any kind of press release or anything, I'd push it out through our social media and our email blast to let everybody know. And then the other thing that, the threshold for the amount of blood that we are getting from these closed colony blood banks, that all that data wasn't really available to know exactly what the threshold, because there was this fictitious year of COVID and, everything that we were going through. So I'm wondering, have we set a bar at CDFA for what do we need to accomplish through the community blood banking that we then know to, phase out these closed colony licenses because we're meeting that threshold. So my 2 points are, one, please get it out as far and wide as possible, and that we want to help. Thank you. And also about this threshold question. So thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for the suggestions, and yeah, outreach will be a priority for us in 2023, and we'll partner with as many people as we can to get the word out. In regard to your threshold question, that's set out in statute that CDFA will discontinue its licensing program for commercial blood banks for animals within 18 months of making a finding that community blood banks sold an annual amount of canine blood in California that equals or exceeds the annual amount that closed colony blood banks sold in 4 consecutive quarters. So that's what we're going to be using for that threshold, since that's specifically spelled out in statute.
Great, thank you. Any other public comment?
This is the moderator. We have another request for public comment from Jennifer Fearing. And Jennifer, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak and a 15-second warning. Please click the unmute me button when the prompt appears on your device.
Jennifer Fearing, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to make a brief comment of gratitude and thanks to Dr. Brady and CDFA for the hard work here. This was a complex bill, the complex statute to draft that took a lot of hands. I know Dr. Miller may be there, and I appreciate all of his hard work on this as well. So I just wanted to thank you for your work to implement this program and our hope that it is successful, and second, the notion that there are an awful lot of veterinarians and clients out there hopeful that this program is successful, but know that it's not happening without a lot of work on your part, and wanted to just express that appreciation. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, this is the moderator. We have another request for public comment from Nicholas Sackett. And Nicholas, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak and a 15-second warning. Please click the unmute me button when the prompt appears on your device.
Nicholas Sackett, also with social compassion in legislation. I worked on this bill as well with Judy, members in the Assembly and the Senate, and Jennifer Fearing and her clients, and also just want to echo our appreciation for all the hard work at CDFA and with the board. So thank you very much, and we look to monitoring how implementation continues.
Thank you so much.
All right, this is the moderator. Appears that was our last request for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Okay, is there any other questions or comments after that? All right, well, thank you so much for coming. Again, I really appreciate your work on this and working with us, so thank you.
And thank you for all of your input and help in putting this together, and I look forward to future collaborations on implementing everything related to animal blood banks.
Okay, so our next item is going to be a long one, and we probably all had coffee this morning, so I think we're going to take a 10-minute break before starting on the review, discussion, and possible action on multidisciplinary advisory committee.
Do we want to make it a 13-minute break and come back at 11, so it's even?
Sounds great to me.
Great.
We're missing one person, but I think we'll get started in the interest of time. And our lovely Ms. Schofield, come on up. We are going to have an update from our MDC meeting. I will say I could have never predicted when I was a child that I would get excited about a legislative proposal in my future, but I was genuinely excited yesterday as we came to an agreement there. So you have your work cut out for you, and we have Dr. Sullivan here to help. so go ahead.
Good morning. I am Leah Schufeltz, RVT, Chair of the MDC as of yesterday, so thank you for seeing us. And what I am going to do, as you can see, we had a very jam-packed agenda yesterday with a lot of our agenda items leading to recommendations for you guys here at the board. So as part of agenda item 6, the first thing is a general overview of our meeting yesterday. So my plan is to go through our agenda with a kind of bird's eye view overview of the topics discussed, and then in their each individual items farther down in agenda item number 6, have Dr. Sullivan and Murray present on part of it that they're involved with and go through them individually there. So hopefully this will kind of help you guys see where we're at and where we're going on the MDC level of things. And so I was going to start, sorry, I lost my page already. From the opening of our agenda, our first item of business discussed were an update from our Equine Practice Subcommittee by Dr. Sullivan and Ms. Ussery. They updated the committee on their meetings with CVMA, CHRB, or the California Horse Racing Board, UC Davis School of Veterinary Medicine, and board staff, in which they continue to discuss concerns that have created conflict between the board and the equine veterinary community. Their work is attempting to resolve issues of herd. Sorry, I lost my spot again. They are working on the issues of herd equine practice veterinarian exams of herd animals and the ability of a client to designate an agent to form the VCPR with the veterinarian. Their work led to the legislative proposal, which is in your packet, which will be going into further detail as a part of agenda item 6D. Also, the subcommittee reported on communications with CHRB in regards to their board's proposed amendments to CCR Title IV, Section 1867, subsection B. The communications are in regards to interpretations of this section and use of compounded medications for office stock versus individual use for an individual patient, and requirements of who is able to compound the medications. Details of this will be discussed in item number 6E below. Our next agenda item was a discussion from the MDC leadership, potential rulemaking regarding VCPR, animal health care tasks, and definitions regarding RVTs. In this discussion, Dr. Sullivan summarized meetings between the MDC leadership, board staff, legal counsel, and CVMA, in which proposed regulations were discussed in order to look at ways in which there may be an opportunity to increase access to veterinary care for low-income individuals by increasing the scope of what RVTs can do under the direct supervision of a veterinarian in an animal hospital setting. The details of this are under agenda item 6F. And then our next update was from our complaint process audit subcommittee, which is Dr. Sequoia and Dr. Bradbury. And they discussed the recent subject matter expert training that was used to address commonly asked questions and go over the review process as a whole. Recently, the board had recommended, and our subcommittee agreed to quarterly meetings with the board's experts. And goals of those meetings are to provide an overview of the current workload, waiting for expert review, give feedback regarding prior reviews and training. So the subcommittee, board management, and board's deputy attorney general liaison will participate in those meetings once a quarter. The first of these quarterly meetings is scheduled for next month. And they will continue to provide updates to the MDC after these meetings. They also reported that the Medical Board of California utilizes scenarios during their expert trainings to sharpen the skills and get consistency on the thoughts from their experts. So our subcommittee used this concept to create veterinary case-specific scenarios for our experts, which they had given to the experts and overall got positive feedback on. They're going to discuss those scenarios further with the experts at their training session next month. And the subcommittee also had been tasked by the board to review the current criteria to become subject matter experts, and their findings and recommendations on that part of it are going to be agenda items 6, G, and H. Let's see, the next thing that we discussed was our agenda item 8 at the MDC was Dr. Sullivan discussing adding of a new item for the board's frequently asked questions section in regards to VCPR. The board had decided the VCPR frequently asked questions should be a living document where additions and revisions could be added as more questions were received. The board has been fielding questions about VCPR in regards to refilling prescriptions at alternate locations. So Dr. Sullivan has come up with language that we will be sharing with you in just a little while to potentially be added to those FAQs. After that, our next discussion was on the development of guidelines for veterinary recommendation of cannabis. As you know, we've had new legislation come into effect about the recommendation of cannabis by veterinarians, and there was a lot of work done by Dr. Bradbury and Dr. Sullivan on looking at updating our current guidelines, talking with the Assembly member, Calra's office, and trying to get these things all taken care of. That Dr. Sullivan and Bradbury shared their draft guidelines for the discussion and recommendation of cannabis within the VCPR. They're working to ensure that our guidelines are in line with both state and federal regulations, since those are different. So after discussion at the MDC meeting and with the public, it was decided to table this agenda item until April, so there's time to meet with stakeholders prior to making further recommendations. So we'll be including this item on our April agenda. And then the last order of business was from the RVT Education Subcommittee, which is Jennifer Laredo and myself, and we summarized recent work since the last MDC meeting. The RVT Education Subcommittees had multiple meetings with board staff and stakeholders, conducted research regarding the history of the school approval requirements, and reviewed the board's various statutes and regulations regarding RVT programs. We also met with Dr. Femini, who is from Santa Rosa Junior College's Vet Tech program, in response to some public comments he has made regarding the RVT education, and we got a lot of information from him as well about their program, the history of it, and how their curriculum is approved to help us with that as well. So we also did had a board staff presentation for the subcommittee on how the alternate route applications are processed at the board level, to give us a little bit more information on what is looked at, the overview of what they receive from the programs and what it looks like to go through the applications and process those. In the coming months, the subcommittee will hold interested party stakeholder meetings to discuss the possibility of removing the board approval requirement and maintaining the regulations specific to course requirements. So that is that part of it. And then we have our future meetings and our future agenda items discussed, and I'm sure we're going to have more of those things added after here. So that's our, if anyone has any questions on that brief overview, or a whole lot of things, I guess the good part is a lot of the items are going to be discussed further.
Thank you.
Okay, the next agenda item is 6B. The board's drug compounding regulations became effective on April 1st, 2022. During the January 2022 meeting, the board directed the MDC to create a guidance document to assist licensees and registrants to comply with the new regulations. Marie and I were on the subcommittee. to draft the guidance as well as a courtesy formula form for use by practitioners to comply with Section 2092, subsection B. On April 19th, 2022, the MDC reviewed and approved the subcommittee's guidance on the veterinary drug compounding guidance and a courtesy formula form. And on July 20th, 2022, the board reviewed, revised, and approved the guidance and compounding drug preparation formula form. During the development of the guidance, the subcommittee identified several gaps in the paper trail that is necessary to document the process of compounding a drug preparation for a client or for office stock. As you have read in the background material in your packet, there was considerable confusion and discussion about the subcommittee's proposal. And basically, the subcommittee went back to work to make the process more efficient, especially with record keeping of IV fluid administration, immediate use of preparation, and documentation of rarely used preparations. So let's get started with the proposed changes to the MDC, starting on page 4. Get started with the board on page 4. I think that's page 4 of your packet also. Okay. So section 2036.5A, we are adding the underlined part. That is a permit holder under the direct and indirect supervision of a licensed veterinarian may administer a controlled substance. And this is what's underlined, a controlled substance, or perform drug compounding as specified in subsection C or D. I'm going to go through a couple of these and then we'll open it up for discussion. Subsection C, we are defining under what condition of supervision a permit holder may compound from a bulk drug substance. Subsection D, we are defining under what conditions of supervision a permit holder may compound from non-bulk substances. I guess we should ask if there's any discussion on that before we go to the next section.
Is there any discussion on that before the next section? No one in the room. I don't see any hands up for the group. No, I mean for the board. Sorry, I was on the board. And then we will have public comment in the room. Thanks.
So Grant Miller, CVMA, just a non-substantive change. I'm kind of with Jessica on this, that we should be eliminating animal hospital setting. Although animal hospital setting is defined in Section 2034 of our regulation, it's synonymous with a registered veterinary premises pursuant to 4853. So I would recommend, I think it's non-substantive since the two are synonymous. I would recommend just changing animal hospital setting to registered veterinary premises. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public in the room? No. Moderator, can you open it up to the public on WebEx, please?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen or use the raise hand function. And audio-only participants can raise their hand by pressing *3 on their device. I'll go ahead and pause a moment to allow the public time to access these features and submit their requests. All right, and seeing none, would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
So what we'll do is continue through the section, and then if at the end, if it is approved, we can approve it as amended as we've gone through, if that's all right with the chair.
Thank you. I was going to ask if we should which way we should go with that, so I appreciate that. I like that plan.
Yeah. So next is section 2090. And throughout the document, we have areas, in this case, both in subsection A and B, where we're using the abbreviation RVT for registered veterinary technician and adding or permit holder. In E, we're defining immediate use, and this is important. This is important in that if you are using a sterile product in immediate use, which is within 4 hours of delivery, you do not have to document it as a compounded product. You're going to have to document the information in the medical records, but it's not considered a compounded product. In F, we are defining office stock, and we're adding to the definition of office stock, which again is on page 5, and it just clarifies what office stock is. Later on, we got into some problems because we did not have the labeling requirements well defined. I guess we might as well open that up for discussion too, because then we're going into another different section.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I just had one kind of an editing comment, and I'm not sure sometimes the way that things are typed in legalese may warrant this. C, subsection C2, it says the sole act of tablet splitting or crushing, comma, or capsule opening. What did I have there? Yeah, I think the comma should stay is what because I think it was removed there just because tablet splitting or crushing is separate, but that is really a minor change now that I'm looking at it. Anybody else in the room, on the board? Okay. No hands up for the board members. Any public comment in the room?
So to be clear, you're recommending that 2090 subsection C, paragraph 2, it's proposed to strike the comma, and you're thinking it should not strike the comma, just keep it.
Yes.
I would say a tablet, it's talking about a tablet versus a capsule, and we've got tablet splitting or crushing, but if we add a comma, I mean, this is about tablets and capsules, so I would say that we don't need the comma because it's tablet splitting or crushing. That's piece 1, or capsule opening.
That's fine. Okay, I don't see any, Dr. Solicito?
Yeah, I just needed a little clarification with regards to the office stock, because the way that I'm reading it is it's the drug without patient-specific prescription used in the hospital. I get that, or in mobile units. But then the attached statement, or dispensed only to a client's representative, or other veterinarian at the same veterinary premises. I'm a little kind of thrown off with the client. So we're dispensing it to a client without a specific patient?
No. So when it's office stock, so it's usually it's something that you need right away. So we're okay to compound something, hold it in the clinic or on the vehicle, and then when it's needed in an urgent case, then we can dispense it to the client, and now there's a label put on whatever we're dispensing. So then it goes to the medical record. But if it's office stock, for example, that's an anesthetic, then it is there's a paper trail in the clinic that it is compounded as office stock in the clinic. Then it gets recorded when it's used as an anesthetic in an individual case on the anesthetic log. So there's a paper trail that way.
So should there be a sub-statement? I don't know how legislation should be written, but should that be clarified that once it's dispensed, there's a requirement that it has to have that label for the specific patient that it's going to be used for?
It should be covered under the labeling part of this section later on.
Okay. Thank you.
I think, did we open it up to comment?
Not yet.
Can you open it up to the public online?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or use the raise hand function. And audio-only participants can raise their hand by pressing *3 on their device. All right, and it seems there are no requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
And did you ask for comment in the room?
I did.
Okay, great. So moving on to 2091, subsection A2, I should say. We're again adding the abbreviation of RVT and permit holder. In B, we're clearing up some confusion on the original wording with this section. We're removing for each compounded drug preparation. And we have, let's see, this is on B. So
I'm having a hard time. I think you skipped a page.
Yes, I did.
Sorry.
So 2091B, we're adding, again, the abbreviation. And then in subsection C, we are adding, that's all we're doing. We're adding the RVT and permit holder language. So that in C, they're restricted in not being able to compound sterile and non-sterile preparations unless there are no human or animal drugs approved by the FDA and available that satisfies the needs of this preparation. So some of this is existing language for the veterinarian. Now we're adding the RVT and the permit holder to this language. If that's clear, I'll move on to the next section. Okay, and then if there's comments in the public, we can come back to it. Then on 2092A2, again, adding language that we've discussed. In D, we're clearing up, there was a lot of confusion in this section, so we're clearing it up, and let me get to it. And saying, except as provided under subsection D and E, a master formula document shall be maintained for each compounded drug preparation and include the following. So the way we originally wrote it, it was confusing, and this should clear it up. In other words, we're going to have one document that is and the example we're giving is a master formula document that's going to list all of what we call the recipes, all of the formulas of what that clinic is or premises is going to compound. It's going to be in one place, and it can be referred to whenever needed. So then, and to accomplish that, we added the name, strength, and quantity of each active ingredient in B2 and in B4 for inactive ingredients. In B7, we're able to eliminate any confusion by adding additional steps in record keeping. So the name is in B7. So now we've got the essence of what is in that master formula document. We're using lowercase because we're not saying that it's required by regulation. This is an example. If somebody wants to do this type of thing on in a computer system, they can do it. In subsection C, we're adding the word master to the formula. In D, we are saying if a preparation is rarely compounded, all of the information required in B, 2 through 7, may be put in the animal's medical record rather than the master formula. In D, we are making provisions for IV fluids for immediate use, that IV fluids are listed in the medical records and that the only thing that you're going to need is to add what ingredients you've added to the bag of fluids. The original version of this, actually, we didn't even consider IV fluids, and stakeholders suggested that we need to make that a lot more efficient. Okay, and F, again, just making some changes to the RVT and permit holder. In F3, we are removing addressing the storage because it's in 2094 subsection C. I'm also recommending, and this is not here, let me just check here. I think that, I think in F we are missing the name of the compounded preparation, and I'm recommending that we add that to this list. That's in the medical record. We have to have the name of the product in the medical record.
Dr. Sullivan, where is that?
Dr. Sullivan, is that covered under F3 on page 7?
In my version, it is not. So if it's already there, we're fine. Okay.
It says name, amount, and strength of the compounded drug preparation.
I'm sorry. I misread my notes. In number existing 3, I think the only thing we need is name, because the amount, strength, and compounded drug preparation is in the drug formula. We're duplicating that.
That's true, not the amount. I would say maybe just leave that, because it doesn't take much to say 100 mg per mil, 15 mils.
That's in your formula.
Not the, I mean, the formula doesn't, you might be making 10 mils, you might be making 12 mils, you know, depending on the
formula has...
I mean, the master formula is going to be the master formula for the general...
yeah, name, strength in the formula, if I'm correct.
But like if you only have 7 days of a medication that you're sending home, or you want to send home 14 days, it's going to be a different amount.
Okay, I'll go with that. But in the formula, the quantity of the ingredients is given. So if you're doubling that...
I think it would be helpful for consumer protection and for the patient and for the doctors working on the case to have just, it's a very simple thing to write down in the record, and then, you know, for people don't have to go back to, you know, a binder or an electronic thing to say, oh, how much was sent home, if the client says, you know, oh, I'm not sure how much, you know, if we're trying to figure out what's actually happened, it's,
okay.
Yeah. That's my 2 cents on that.
I have a question. Is there a difference in the strength of the final compounded preparation from the strength of the active ingredients and strength of the inactive ingredients? Because the master formula form requires documentation of the named strength and quantity of active ingredients, and separately named strength and quantity of inactive ingredients. And then under F3, or proposed F3, current F4, it's name, amount, and strength of the compounded drug preparation. So the form, master formula form, doesn't otherwise indicate the strength of the final compounded preparation.
I would defer to someone else to answer that, because I am not sure. When I see strength of a preparation, it's usually milligrams per milliliter.
I think usually the active ingredient is what it's relating to, but maybe we need to clarify that in subsection 4 or 3, depending on which version we go with, and say the amount and strength of the active ingredients in the compounded drug preparation to make it more clear.
Well, the problem is sometimes there's more than one active ingredient, so that gets a little complicated there.
Yes.
I feel like if I was to
I think it should be up in the formula if it's any place.
Okay. Anybody else?
So there's a difference, or there is no difference in the strength of the final compounded drug preparation compared to the strength of all active ingredients. It's going to be the same strength in the final preparation.
Can you address that? Because this is beyond me.
That's the idea.
So Grant Miller, CVMA, yes, that's correct. So, but the concern that I have is that we had very carefully crafted this regulation to not run afoul of 2032.3, which is our current medical record keeping requirement, which requires us to indicate the name, strength, and amount. So we would need strength in here. So I do like the idea of adding active ingredient because that's essentially what you're asking for. So if I have a compound that has chlorhexidine 4% and it has 10 milligrams of dexamethasone, you just write out those things. You say that. So it would be, I dispensed 3 ounces of a 4% chlorhexidine, 10 milligram dexamethasone compound. And if it has a name, I mean, maybe I call it whatever, Dr. Nolan's, secret cream, whatever, then you write the name. But in order to not run us afoul of our current record-keeping regulations, we would need to maintain the strength.
And I would suggest you add an S to the end of ingredient when you say active, because like you just gave an example of that you might really want to know the information on all the active ingredients.
I like that. Go ahead.
So then it sounds like the amendment, Jeff, if you wouldn't mind typing it up, name, amount, and strength of active ingredients in the compounded drug preparation.
Yes.
So is that an addition to proposed 3 or inserting it into proposed 3?
Inserting.
Okay, so we're striking compounded drug preparation because
we're just adding the strength of the, and then adding active ingredient, probably with parentheses S, and then compounded drug preparation.
In the compounded drug preparation.
Okay.
So I think this is a pretty meaty part of this. So for pages 6 and 7, any other comments from the board regarding all of this?
Well, I just was going to add that I don't think that complicates things because I think it's exactly what you would do in practice anyway. So I think it's really clarifying the active ingredient.
Anybody else? I had just one kind of, I made these comments and this was last weekend, so forgive me, on, this is regarding the F3, we're striking directions for its storage and administration. And I think you mentioned that's we struck that because it is elsewhere. Right. And I think that's from 2032.3 subsection A12, where it's required in the medical records. And I started looking at some of these, and this might be a separate issue, but in labeling, I don't see in 2032.2 any requirement regarding directions for storage. And I see that, like if there's refrigeration, I see that we're adding 2094C for compounded drugs, but sometimes there is, and this again may be just a completely separate issue, and I didn't know if we just wanted to make to keep that on our radar, that there's some non-compounded medications that when we mix them together, they require refrigeration, and that's actually not, like clavicillin and things like that. That directions for its storage and administration aren't there, and so I want to make sure that's clear that has to be somewhere on the label.
Doesn't 2094 subsection C take care of that?
Yeah, but that's just for compounded drugs, is my understanding of that.
Well, that's all we're dealing with.
I know in this. I'm saying, though, that in general, there's just that isn't on our labeling. I'm sorry. I'm bringing up something that isn't. Oh. Yes.
But
okay.
it's on, but
I'll table that and bring that up at another time.
But it is the directions from the manufacturer which we have to follow. So this is for.
Yeah. Dr. Miller.
So this gets a little complicated. So in 2094B, it's for office stock. So when you create this for use in your office, the label that must be on that in the office is the following. But if you are to take office stock and dispense it to a patient, 2032.2B, which is existing law, then overlays this labeling requirement. I would prefer that the labeling requirements be as synonymous as possible because of the confusion that will ensue in the implementation of something. Now, I do believe that intuitively when you have office stock, when the staff goes to give it to a client, they're going to know I need to put the patient's name on this. But I do believe that for purposes of consumer protection, following 2032.2B as closely as possible would be in our best interest. They're not that far off, but the concerns that you bring up are in that vein, right? So, for instance, in the office stock B1, we had decided to remove strength, quantity of each ingredient because we have the master document there. But we're going to need to remember that if we put a label on that for the client for dispensed medication, that information would need to be put onto the label. So it's under B6, which says the trade name of the drug or the generic name, the strength, and the quantity, and then the expiration date. That's in our current dispensation. So that might be something for the board to consider when they're looking at 2094B. Are those labeling requirements for office stock sitting on the shelf in the office, are those good? Do we want those, or do we want to take a closer look at that? And I do agree, it's another conversation. Every time we look at these, we find something else.
Okay. So I don't think I had any recommendations for that. I just wanted to bring that up. So any other comments from the board? Kathy?
Yeah, just to get back to Dr. Miller's point, in subsection A, where it says all labeling and dispensed drug preparation shall comply with subsection. I'm sorry, doesn't that kind of cover?
Let's go back.
Thank
We're
you.
not on that section yet, so let's stay with where we're at, and then we'll do a deep dive into that next.
Sorry. Anybody else up here on the board? Dr. Solicito?
Yeah, can't get over the whole label thing. But I was just thinking, somehow if I'm reading this, I feel like I need to read the difference between the label for an office stock and a dispensed office stock compound.
Let's get to that in the next section.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Okay, I don't see any hands up. So any other public comment in the room? Not seeing any. Moderator, would you please open it up to public comment online?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen or use the raise hand function. And audio-only participants can raise their hand by pressing *3 on their device. I'll pause a moment to allow the public time to access these features and submit their requests. All right, and seeing none, would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. All right, Dr. Sullivan.
Okay, now let's address the labeling. So this is 2094, and in B we are labeling what needs to be on the office stock, which is located either at the, in the building or on the vehicle that's being used within the clinic. So this is not being dispensed yet. This is the doctors using it, or the RVT. So we're adding the name assigned to the compounding drug preparation pursuant to paragraph 7 of subsection B of section 2092. We've removed number 3 because we cannot find that in those terms in the Practice Act, so it's not necessary to have. So let's, as I see it, the office stock is something that's within the practice. It has a name. If we want or need, it has the name of the product, the expiration date, the name of the initials of the preparer, and the date of the preparation. And if there's any need to go back and see what is in it and the concentration, it's in the master formula, okay? When that then gets dispensed to a client, then that triggers 2032.2. That's how I interpret it. Now,
my concern here is if I am a practitioner and I'm not very familiar with legislation and I have a concern and I want to do things right, and my concern is labeling, I'm going to go to the section that says labeling of compounded preparations. If I don't see any guidance of refer to whatever legislation covers it, or if there's nothing written here that if product is going to be dispensed, this is what you do. I just feel that sometimes the way that these regulations are written, sometimes we somebody has to learn how to read this properly to be guided well. So I'm just thinking, would it hurt if we put something there to guide a practitioner to really understand what they're supposed to be looking at when it comes to the labeling of compounded preparations?
Yeah, so I was just going to remind the board, too, that the subcommittee also worked on drug compounding guidance document that the board approved at the last meeting, and that's kind of how this whole conversation came up. The regulations themselves aren't that clear, and so this is why we're clearing it up in this rulemaking proposal. But what I would say is, and I don't mean to speak for Dr. Solomon, but I'll speak for him. I think that we're open, as soon as this takes effect, then that guidance document would be updated to reflect the new regulations to make it as clear as possible for whoever is compounding this, they can use this guidance document.
So we have another document for a practitioner to be familiar with.
Yeah, and we have that now. The board, yeah, I think so. Yeah, so it is in here, and so this would be updated as the regulations become effective.
I think, Dr. Nolan, did you have a question?
No, I think it just got answered. I was just gonna help.
Sarah?
The only thing I would note is that 2094, we're adding a new provision for refrigeration, which is great. But looking at 2032.2 subsection B, there is no requirement for directions for storage.
That was what I was worried about, yeah.
Right, but that's not in this proposal. That's a different, that's a different proposed regulatory change. But yeah, I'm just saying that, should be looked at a later time, but this proposal has that.
But in those cases, those products are manufactured products that have instructions in them how to store them and if they're refrigerated, it'll have on there refrigeration required, and then we usually put another label on there to refrigerate. So I don't think it's there because it comes with instructions from the manufacturer.
Jamie?
That's what I was going to say,
But it doesn't actually, that's not the requirement. The requirement for 2032.2 subsection B, there's directions for use, that's required. But as far as the manufacturer under paragraph 6, it says what's required on the label is the manufacturer's trade name of the drug or the generic names, strength, and quantity of drug, and the expiration date when established by the manufacturer. There's no requirement to include the manufacturer's instructions on the label or directions for storage.
Dr. Miller?
So this is a parking lot issue. This 2032.2B needs to be updated. There are two issues in which it is not parallel with other regulatory agencies. Number one, Board of Pharmacy has a labeling requirement for all prescribers to include the condition for which the medication is being dispensed. We're missing that in ours. And then on a federal level, if you're dispensing a controlled substance, the Code of Federal Regulations requires a statement that's specified that talks about it being a controlled substance. So I think this 2032.2B needs to be looked at. But to address Dr. Solicito's concern regarding its application to 2094, I just did a side-by-side, just looking here and looking at what is germane to being on a shelf in an office and what is going to go to a client. And I would suggest that the board look at proposed 2094B1 and consider what is currently struck as strength and quantity of each ingredient. If that were to be changed back to be included, you would be much closer to the labeling requirement for 2032.2B, and Dick's probably going to just reach over and choke me. There may be a level of consumer protection there because if you have Dr. Nolan's secret medication cream on the shelf and there's different strengths, it would be possible for somebody to grab the wrong strength if there wasn't it written on the bottle. If it just said Formula 1, Formula 2, Formula 3, I think the chance of error is greater than if the strengths are actually written on the office stock. So that might be something that this board could consider. Not that I want to make more work for veterinarians, but that strikeout is probably the most productive conversation just based on my, napkin.
We talked about that if I remember correctly, in MDC, and there was a lot of discussion on how huge the label would have to be if we had to put the strength and quantity of each ingredient. Should we have the strength and quantity of each active ingredient? Would that be
That's what I was going to suggest, is maybe you focus on the active ingredients.
Yes, the active ingredients, thank you. And just remember that that if it is dispensed to a client, that's required by 2032.2B6. So the label's going to have to
office
fit.
stock, though.
Well, it's the bottle. So it changes from office stock to a dispensed medication when you hand it to the client, but the size of the bottle is still the same. So this is always an issue, because then not only do they want all this information on the bottle, and I say they by some of the pharmacy regs, but they want it to be in a font big enough to read.
Right.
And so before you know it, you're in this quandary of how do I do
Well, that's
this?
why there's things taped and you pull it out. And,
Right.
Yeah.
But I think that for the purposes of the discussion today, you may want to revisit this strikeout in 2094B1 and just give that a little bit more thought to decide if it's okay. Does it satisfy your level of comfort as practitioners and for consumer protection to leave that struck? If you were to unstrike it, you would be bringing it closer to 2032.2B, which is itself flawed, but also possibly adding a layer of consumer protection by ensuring that if there are multiple formulations of that same secret cream, you're decreasing the chance that one will be mixed up for the other.
I feel like it's not that big of a deal to ask somebody to write that on the bottle. I feel like that's I would want to write that on the bottle if I was putting it there rather than master formula. I think it was part of the back and forth over the many meetings. I think, Dr. Solicito, I might be confused, but I think you were more concerned about subsection A, and that it refers you to another section 2032.2, subsection B, where somebody then would have to somehow find that and then read that to know what the dispensed compounded drug preparation label should look like. And what you were asking, if I was understanding, was that can we just lay that out here so that it's clear, so it's all in one place as well? Was that what you were talking about?
Yeah, because me just reading it, 2032.2, if I don't know what that is, I would know that it's about labeling dispensed medication. So I'm just thinking, is there a way that we could help our practitioners be more familiar, easier? Because not everybody has the time or the intention, I guess, to really go into this whole numbers thing. I'm just thinking of looking from like a practical, how do we make our legislation user-friendly? That's pretty much it.
And I think that is part of the guidelines, but Tara?
I would propose that someone actually looking at this in regulation, Section 2094, has an idea of how to cross-reference 2032.2. If they're not familiar with looking up the CCRs, then they're probably looking at the board's guidance document. And so that's one. But two is, we're going to have a problem at the Office of Administrative Law if we start inserting all of 2032.2B, because then we have to justify every single requirement, and then there's also the redundancy and duplication problem. So we've got this cross-reference here so that it'll pass muster. We don't have to over-explain, and it'll actually get through OAL review.
I don't see hands there. I see Jessica's hand here.
I guess I'm going to ask Tara for clarification. So in saying that, you don't think we should insert the strength and quantity of each active ingredient?
I haven't. Yeah, I'm talking about subsection A. With respect to B1, I think you're still going to have the name assigned to the compound under the document, because the document is what lists the active and inactive ingredients. But yeah, you could also return existing B1 to require the name, strength, and quantity of each active ingredient.
And can I propose that as a?
We'll do that at the end.
Yeah.
At the end, thank you.
So, Jeff, would you mind showing on the screen what that would look like? So you're going to reject the deletion of strength and quantity of each ingredient, and then you would add, underline after each, put active.
It's creating another subsection though, because we've got B1 right now, under existing law, it's name, strength, and quantity of each ingredient. So we would, under existing law, just be saying name, strength, and quantity of each insert underline active ingredient. But we also still need the name of the assigned to the compounded drug preparation under the document. So that's a new paragraph under subsection B.
Okay.
I can't see that, so. Does that look right to you?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, any more comments from the board? All right. How about?
I'll just say that when.
Yes, please.
This is just minor, but what I'm hearing from Dr. Salcido is if we changed in subdivision A, the first 8 words so that it's easier to follow. Right now, it's all labeling of any dispensed compounded drug preparation. You could replace that with, if a compounding drug preparation is being dispensed, it shall comply with. Is that, because what I understand is your problem is that you couldn't figure it out at first, and maybe those words could be fixed. To just say, if a compounded drug preparation is being dispensed, it shall comply.
Yes, for my non-legal mind, I would say it is clearer when you're saying if your office stock, which is the compounded drug, will be dispensed, then it should comply with this. So then now I'm like, oh, okay, I have to go figure out what that 2032.2 is. I just, yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. I don't know if at this stage, they've worked so hard on this language, but
I know.
I wanted to reflect back. That's what.
And that's why I guess my question is it possible? I just want it to be considered if there's a possibility for us to put that in language. But I do know that there's a certain way that, legislation is written. So I'm not here to change the world.
So was the suggestion to revise subsection A to refer to office stock, or have a new subsection under 2094 to say if office stock is dispensed, then subsection A applies? Because right now, subsection A is all labeling of any dispensed compounded drug preparation has to be labeled.
I think that's correct.
That has to stay because
all labeling of any
this is
dispensed
everything
compounded, yeah.
dispensed. It's not just from office stock. So we would have to add another subsection to apply office stock being dispensed. Then that would have to comply.
I would suggest that we don't do that, but that would be my suggestion.
Sorry. Now I'm just going back to this. Because is it unclear, Dr. Salcido, that office stock is considered part of all labeling? Like everything that has to be labeled? That's what you're saying is confusing. That office stock isn't considered part of what needs to be labeled? No.
I'm sorry. I think what I was trying to get some clarity on is the distinction between the labeling that is being required of the office stock and the difference of the labeling for a dispensed office stock. because there's distinction, wherein the office stock does not require the patient, the client, and although there's specific information that is not required of the office stock, but once you dispense it, then there is that requirement. So I just was thinking about, is there like distinction? But then, now that I've, been listening, this is now all defined in 2032.2. Yeah, so I just thought it would be a little easier if it's already there.
All right. Any public comment in the room? Can you open it up online, please?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or use the raise hand function. And audio-only participants can raise their hand by pressing *3 on their device. I'll go ahead and pause a moment to allow the public time to access these features and submit their requests. All right, and seeing none, would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Jessica.
So before we go to any kind of motion, I just want to clarify that this rulemaking package, throughout it, is adding the term permit holder in it. So if members recall, in October, the board approved a legislative proposal from the MDC that adds VACSPs to the ability to compound in Business and Professions Code 4826.5. And so that's not effective yet, right? We have to get that in legislation and have that changed. And so if you do approve this rulemaking, just know that we may have to remove permit holder if that change in statute hasn't happened before we submit that. So I just wanted to clarify for everybody.
Okay. Does anyone want to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and make a motion to accept as amended, and I got to read all this language. Oh my gosh. Entertain a motion to approve the proposed regulatory changes as amended, direct the executive officer to take all steps necessary to initiate the rulemaking process, authorize the executive officer to make any technical or non-substantive changes to the rulemaking package, notice the proposed text for a 45-day comment period, and if no adverse comments are received during the 45-day comment period and no hearing is requested, adopt the proposed regulatory changes.
Okay.
Can I get clarification on the revised proposal? Did the board accept Dr. Miller's request to change all references of animal hospital setting to veterinary premises?
Yes,
veterinary
I think
premises.
that was a part of the amended, as well as adding in the stricken wording and including active in front of ingredient.
So along with that, can we also propose striking the animal hospital setting definition?
Because it's sure, I don't remember seeing that up there. Let's see.
Do you think since it's not agendized, we
I
have to
think,
wait on that?
yeah, I think you'll have to wait on that change because it's not agendized.
Okay.
It's, the definition is in CCR Title 16, Section 2034.
Okay, should we just just roll through it one more time to make sure that we are all clear on the changes? So we have the changes throughout with the animal hospital to register.
I think in F, it's actually in, if you take a look at 2090 F, it's correctly listed as registered veterinary premises under the office stock under F. So that one is already correct. We're going to mimic that.
Okay.
in the other areas where it talks about animal hospital.
So are you guys searching for that?
Since you're proposing to strike the definition of animal hospital setting from 2034, would you prefer to properly agendize that amendment to 2034 and then review the entire package in April with everything in it as proposed during this meeting? That might be cleaner. That way you're not trying to do 2034 separately.
What do you think? MDC, yes, go ahead.
I was going to jump back because Kathy was asking where it was, and the animal hospital wording is up in 2036.5. Just for Kathy. Sorry, I was going back to her question. So moving on to agendize the whole thing.
I feel like we were good to keep going here with this. And we can work on the other at the next meeting.
So for this rulemaking package, we're going to proceed with the amendments that everything in this rulemaking package, any reference to animal hospital setting will be changed to registered veterinary premises.
Yes, please. And then
Nolan.
Dr. Nolan.
Does that include the title of the 2036.5 where it says animal hospital healthcare? So we want to make sure we change that as well.
We can change that as well.
Nice catch. And then there was the other couple of amendments that were related to the active ingredients. And I think that was it. Is that correct? Everybody?
Yeah, and globally, we're changing it to RVT or permit holder in a number of sections.
Okay. Okay.
And in 2094, we added back in the new subsections for strength and quantity of each ingredient. Each active ingredient.
Yes. Okay.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
The specific on 2092, new subsection F for subparagraph, which is going to be 3, the specific language that is accepted as being added as a part of the amendment, it's name, amount, and strength of active ingredients, the S in parentheses, in the compounded drug preparation.
Correct.
I want to make that record clear.
Yep. Thank you. Perfect. And I think we were going to add to 2094 subsection B, subsection 1, or not add, but not accept the stricken segment of a sentence, but and instead have it say strength and quantity of each active ingredient.
It's going to be name, strength, and quantity under a new subsection 2.
Oh, okay. So we're going to have subsection 1, name assigned to the compounded drug preparation pursuant to paragraph 7 of subsection B of subsection 2092. Then B2, name, strength, and quantity of each ingredient. Active ingredient, yes. Yep. Okay. Okay, I feel like that's pretty clear. Everybody here clear? Okay, no hands up in the board there. Any public comment?
Wait.
Oh, sorry.
We need a second.
We had a second,
Okay, thank you.
No public comment in the room. Can we open it up, moderator, please?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen or use the raise hand function. And audio-only participants can raise their hand by pressing *3 on their device. I'll go ahead and pause a moment to allow the public time to access these features and submit their requests. All right, and seeing none, would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Okay, I don't see any more comments. Why don't we call for a vote?
Dr. Solicito?
Yes.
Ms. Bowler?
Aye.
Ms. Laredo?
Yes.
Dr. Noland?
Aye.
Ms. Prado?
Yes.
Ms. Berber?
Yes.
Dr. Bradbury?
Yes.
Motion carries.
I feel like celebrating again. Nice job. I think it's time for lunch. So should we do a 45-minute?
Come back at 1, yeah.
Yeah, let's come back at 1. Thanks, everyone. And then if the board members that are joining us on the web could just turn on their cameras very quickly just to confirm you're here, please. Or stay here. Okay. Should we give them a second to get back?
Jennifer, Maria, are you there?
Still have a quorum.
We do have a quorum. We can continue. I'll go ahead and text them and see.
Do you want me to wait or no? Okay. All right. So welcome back. We are still working through agenda item 6, and I believe we are on agenda item 6C, which is the recommendation on proposed revisions to guidance on veterinary drug compounding regarding drug consultation. And Ms. Ussery, is that how, am I saying that correctly? Yes. Okay. It looks like she's going to be presenting that to us.
So with the last item, Dr. Sullivan gave a brief history on the regulations that you guys just discussed. So the guidance and compounded drug preparation formula forms for those regulations were reviewed and approved by the MDC on April 19th, 2022, and reviewed, revised, and approved by the board on July 20th, 2022. Following the July 2022 board meeting, the subcommittee continued to review the drug compounding regulations and guidance. The committee found that additional revisions to the guidance were necessary to alert veterinarians to the requirement in BPC 4829.5 to provide in-person or through electronic means drug consultations to clients or their agents when the veterinarian initially dispenses or furnishes a compounded drug preparation. Since commonly used resources for medication information, such as PLUMS, do not provide such information for compounded drug preparations, and the veterinarian must provide drug documentation upon request, an information document would need to be developed to satisfy the requirements of BPC 4829.5. The subcommittee notes that providing this document to all clients regardless of request would be beneficial, since the drug label may not contain all details of the formula that may be needed if an animal patient is given an overdose or if a child is accidentally exposed to or ingests the compounded drug preparation, which may occur when the veterinary premises is closed. For this reason, the subcommittee recommends that the guidance document be amended to include the following drug consultation information requirement, which is underlined on the attached document. And it reads, please note that each time a veterinarian initially prescribes, dispenses, or furnishes a dangerous drug, as defined in BPC Section 4022, to an animal patient in an outpatient setting, the veterinarian shall offer to provide in-person or through electronic means to the client responsible for the animal or his or her agent a consultation that includes specified medication information, BPC Section 4829.5. As such, any new compounded drug preparation that is classified as a dangerous drug will require information to be provided to the client to satisfy BPC Section 4829.5. Although not required unless requested by the client, it is recommended that every client be provided this information in writing and include the compounded drug preparation formula in case of emergency or if the poison center needs to know the ingredients and concentrations. After discussion on this during the October 2022 meeting, the MDC approved a motion to recommend the board adopt the revised guidance on veterinary drug compounding and courtesy compounded drug preparation formula form for posting on the board's website and dissemination to all licensees and stakeholders.
Thank you. I think I don't know if we want to go through it specifically or just see if anybody has any comments regarding it.
Yes, so the only addition that wasn't already approved would be that underlined section.
Got it, okay. When I was reading through it, I initially was like, oh, do we have to add or permit holder? But I think we have to wait to add that based on the previous conversation. And I don't have any other comments. Anybody on the board? Yes, Dr. Nolan.
Again, is this going to be introduced as a law, or is
This is the guidance document so that people can easily kind of, to make it easier than having to look.
So where does that become published, or where is that given to?
Yeah, so once we make this amendment, then we can post it on our website. I'll also work with DCA's public affairs team to make it look nice like our other guidance document, and then we'll disseminate it out. And then once changes are made to law, whether it's the statute or the regulation, this document is essentially a living document that will be continuously updated.
Okay, thanks. I just wasn't sure how it was disseminated and when in the next, in the next few months, or once it's
So once the board approves this, then we'll send it off to DCA Public Affairs to design it, and then we'll post it.
Thank you.
And so, as you're saying, it's a living document. Once the permit holder part goes through, then you'll just automatically add that language.
It'll likely come back to the board because the board is reviewing and approving this. So any changes, like we're proposing some rulemaking changes. So once that's effective, we can update it and bring it back to the board.
Okay, thank you.
One more question. The wording at the beginning says that each time a veterinarian prescribes, dispenses, they shall offer to provide. But then at the bottom it says unless requested by client. So what is the actual rule there? In other words, they're required to provide when requested, or they're required to provide. I guess it's a little bit misleading to me, because at the beginning you say the veterinarian shall offer to provide. Then at the end it says, although not required unless requested by the client. So it's a little bit vague in my mind. It seems like if you're required to provide it when requested, that ought to say that in that first sentence.
I think I have some of that in here. So it's referenced to BPC 4829.5, and that's where that language comes into play. Yep, unless Tara has it.
The second part of that, although not required unless requested, it's about providing it in writing. So perhaps we could clarify the writing piece, but you'll see on that second line, although not required unless requested by the client, is recommended that every client be provided this information in writing.
Could we get the in writing a little closer to the required word?
I guess we would have to do, although not required to be provided in writing.
Unless recommended.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't see any other.
Yeah, I just wanted, about this whole process with the compounding that's been going on for a number of years. And thank you, Dr. Sullivan, for taking the incredible lead on this whole thing. But it just has been, I thought, last meeting, the MDC meetings in the past on this subject, the cooperation between the board, the staff, the MDC, CVMA, all the practitioners, everything. This has been a really, I think, collaborative experience to come to where we are here. And I just want to congratulate everyone, because it's been a very interesting process to watch. And I think at the end of the day, the input was really valuable from all sources. So it's going to be a good product.
Okay, and I don't see any questions from the board online. Any public comment?
Before we do that, can we have a motion?
Is Tara doing her magic and rewriting that first sentence, that sentence?
I think Jeff made the edit on the screen.
Oh, sorry, I can't read the screen, I'm sorry.
So it would be to adopt the revised guidance as amended, but the wording is on page 2 of your materials.
Is there a way when we're amending things that after it's been written, we have somebody read it to us? Because we can't see it.
Sure. The modified text will now read, although not required to be provided in writing unless requested by the client, it is recommended that every client be provided this information and include the compounded drug preparation formula in case of emergency, or if the poison center needs to know the ingredients and concentrations.
I think we need to keep in writing on that second reference, because that's the whole point. Okay.
Okay, that change has been made to keep that language.
I'm sorry. I know this sounds redundant. Can you read it one more time?
Absolutely. Although not required to be provided in writing unless requested by the client, it is recommended that every client be provided this information in writing and include the compounded drug preparation formula in case of emergency, or if the poison center needs to know the ingredients and concentrations.
Thank you so much. We all good with that? Okay, so we have a motion.
Here, I'll make it, I guess, right? So I'd like to entertain a motion to adopt, or make a motion to adopt the revised guidance on veterinary drug revised and amended, I guess, as amended today, guidance on veterinary drug compounding and courtesy compounding drug preparation formula form for posting on the board's website and dissemination to all licensees and stakeholders.
Second the motion.
Great. Public comment?
Grant Miller, CVMA. Online, for the board's consideration, on line 4, would you please consider replacing the terms his or her with the term their? And then also a suggestion on the last sentence, which currently reads in writing and include the compounded drug preparation formula in case of emergency or if the poison center needs to know. Just maybe consider in case of emergency or adverse reaction, period. Let's not worry about the poison center. Just, you know, amendment to emergency or adverse reaction. Thank you.
Dr. Miller, did you want to strike if the poison center needs to know the ingredients and concentrations and just end it at in case of emergency or adverse reactions, period?
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes. Does anybody have any issues with that? That seems reasonable to me. Any other public comment in the room? No? I don't see any hands. Public comment?
I just want to clarify for the Ms. Bowler and Dr. Solcito, who made the motion and seconded, are you going to accept that friendly amendment to the amendment?
I made the motion, and that's fine with me.
And then
For the
Dr.
amendment,
Solcito
not really
seconded.
friendly.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, great. Moderator, would you please open up public comment online, please?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen or use the raise hand function. I'll pause a moment to allow the public time to access these features and submit their requests. All right, and seeing none, would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. I just wanted to say thank you, Ms. Essery. We're always talking about Dr. Sullivan, but you did a ton of work here, and you've really stepped up on the MDC, and I just am very grateful for you. I know we all are very grateful for your work as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
So I think,
That's what we're here for.
Yep, time to call for a vote.
Dr. Solcito?
Yes.
Ms. Bowler?
Aye.
Ms. Laredo?
Yes.
Dr. Noland? Aye. Ms. Prado?
Yes.
Ms. Berber? Dr. Bradbury?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great. Okay. So now we're on agenda item 6D, recommendation on the legislative proposal to amend section 4825.1 of Article 2 and 4875.1 of Article 4 and add sections 4826.01, 4826.6, and 4829.1 to Article 2, Chapter 11, Division 2 of the Business and Professions Code regarding veterinary client-patient relationships and telemedicine. Next time I'll just say that agenda item, I promise.
Okay, thank you. This is what we are calling our legislative package. Some of this had started with the Equine Practice Subcommittee and became involved with the VCPR and everything. So we're just going to call it the legislative package. And I do want to thank everybody for enduring yesterday. It was totally necessary. Wordsmithing is very painful. Last evening I was trying to think of an analogy, and what I came up with is a person with an abscessed tooth. And the dentist says, well, we got to get that tooth pulled, but I don't have any anesthetic. And so it's a very painful process, but when it's over, such relief.
The difference is that the tooth gets pulled quickly.
There was some clapping involved when it passed, I'm just going to say.
Okay, following the Equine Practice Subcommittee meeting with the CVMA, CHRB, and UC Davis School of Veterinary Medicine, the subcommittee reviewed the VCPR regulations and California Code of Regulations 2032.1 to see if amendments could be made to resolve issues of herd, equine practice, veterinary examination of herd animals and equines, and the ability of a client to designate an agent, such as an animal trainer, to form a VCPR with a veterinarian. And although we did accomplish quite a bit yesterday, I want to kind of preface that we're only starting, because we're going to address a lot more starting in February with the Practice Act. The subcommittee reviewed the regulations and determined the VCPR regulations should move into statute, which would provide the most direct and timely manner to address these issues. The subcommittee drafted a legislative proposal to place the VCPR requirements along with a few other issues into statute. The subcommittee then met with CVMA to discuss the legislative proposal, and CVMA agreed placing the VCPR in statute rather than merely revising existing regulations was the appropriate action. The legislative proposal is not intended to expand the scope of practice, but adds important terms and definitions and organizes the VCPR and its requirements in one location. Due to amendment of the same statute, a legislative proposal discussed herein includes the telemedicine legislative proposal previously adopted by the board at its July 2021 meeting. So I don't know if your package is the same page numbers as mine, but mine starts with page 5 with definitions. So we are...
I'm sorry, I just clicked on the meeting materials and it doesn't, I don't have the updated.
Those are shown on the screen.
Oh.
And what I can do, Jess, if you can email that to me, I'll email it to the group up here.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to have such a dramatic sigh with that. Okay, go ahead.
So we're starting on page 5, and we're talking about definitions in 4825.1. We've just moved animal up to the front alphabetically, and probably the most difficult work yesterday was to define client. And towards the end of the day, we did come up with a definition, and that if somebody would like to go ahead, could you go ahead and read that so we have the new definition? I don't have it here.
Sure. We have new 4825.1C. Client means the individuals who have represented to the veterinarian that they are the owner of the animal patient at the time the services are provided.
So I'm going to go through this, and then we're going to come back and discuss it. The next definition we have is for herd, and the only change there is to define a group as 2 or more animals. So a herd refers to any group of 2 or more animals of the same species and located at the same geographic location. Then we have the definitions of teleconsultation, telehealth, telemedicine, and teletriage. The only change is to telehealth, where the term at the end of that, a representative is removed and agent is inserted. So discussion then with these definitions.
Yeah, Tara.
Well, thank you. So I don't have that language in front of me, but I think we might want to consider tweaking the language that currently says who have represented, which, is that what it says?
It says who has.
That sounds like a past term to me, and when we're talking in terms of the VCPR, we've got an individual who is currently saying, I am representing right now to be the owner of the animal. So I think, I think it should just be changed to client means the individual, paren S, close paren, who represents to the veterinarian that they are the owner, open paren S, close paren. Do we have that? Of the animal patient at the time services are provided.
Okay, so when you
That
emailed,
again, could you mind repeating that for me? I'm trying to write it down.
Client means the individual, open paren S, close paren, who represents to the veterinarian that they are the owner, open paren S, close paren, of the animal patient at the time services are provided.
I have a question not about this, just more in general now that I have you all here and we're discussing the definition of a client. Do veterinarians make it a practice to, if a dog, let's say, or cat is microchipped, to check the microchip in relation to who is representing is the owner of the animal? I know I'm opening up a can of worms right now, but it's a question that I've wondered is, I know it's not required under the Veterinary Medical Practice Act. I'm asking because there's actually a large number of unhoused people that have their dogs stolen by rescues or people that are purporting to be rescues, and then they go to a veterinarian and then they receive services for that animal. So I was just wondering, as we're discussing now the definition of who a client is, if there is a practice of checking then who is on the microchip records in relation to who is the owner of the animal. And if no one can answer that, but happy to hear this also offline, but I'm now putting that out there, putting that little seed in there.
If I may just piggyback on what Diane is saying, I think what I'm thinking is like Good Samaritans. right, that would take into their care an animal and would seek, veterinary care, but would have establishing ownership through a microchip would be something that needs to be discussed with the veterinarian, because then they're providing service to an animal but not exactly establishing the VCPR. Is that what you're saying?
We're really careful with this definition to avoid requiring the veterinarian to receive specific documentation as to ownership. We want the veterinarian to receive the animal, rely on the statement of the individual who's presenting the animal for treatment, and treat the animal. So we're trying to avoid hurdles of ownership, and I think right now there's no requirement for a veterinarian to, double check the ownership through a microchip check. And we're thinking right now that's potentially unadvisable, because if there's an ownership issue, that's a civil matter, and we're just trying to get treatment to the animal patient. Since we're discussing the whole section right now, right, can you read the revised definition of herd?
For the new E, herd refers to two or more animals of the same species and located at the same geographic location.
It actually should say a herd refers to any group of two or more animals of the same species and located at the same geographic location.
So it's been emailed to you.
Okay, thanks.
So yeah, and then that'll help.
And you guys are aware that, like, in many instances, ranches have multiple geographic locations for one operation. You're aware of that, right? So, a lot of ranchers have land in the mountains and in the valley, and they have cattle at multiple geographic locations, and it's the same herd of animals.
So when that herd gets vaccination, any kind of treatment, there's going to be maybe the same treatment, but at different locations, it's still the VCPR. Right. So I don't think it interferes with anything.
Well,
I mean, when we're using the term herd, we're using it in terms of prophylactic treatment, vaccinations, wormings.
You've got your herd up in the foothills, and you're going to use foothill abortion vaccine, and you don't have your herd down in the valley, you're not going to. So you still have separate locations with different treatments.
That we're not saying that the treatment has to be the same. We're saying when a group of animals are being treated in one location, you've established you can do prophylactic treatment to that herd with this VCPR.
Okay.
Looks like there's no more questions from the board here, and not from our online members. Moderator, would you please open it up for questions?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or use the raise hand function. I'll pause a moment to allow the public time to access these features and submit their requests. All right, and seeing none, would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please. And I realize I didn't open it up for public comment in the room. I don't see any, so I think we can.
If I may address Dr. Nolan again, maybe better to explain that. This, for a herd, beef herd, dairy herd, whatever, this is already existing. What this definition does is expand it to include horses, kennels, catteries, other groups. It is already there for production animals.
Yeah, I remember years ago, we had that same discussion, though, about geographic location. It's always been, a little bit of a bugaboo, but I'm happy with it.
Okay. Okay. 4826.01, where else?
Sorry, Dr. Sullivan, 1 second.
Well, and I think maybe Ms. Bowler corrected me, but we have the term agent in here. Are we going to redefine that term agent, or we're going to stick with the old definition that we've agreed to? It's in the document. So,
good question.
So, if you look at page 6, new Business and Professions Code, section 4826.01, subdivision C. This effectively defines what an agent is. It's a person who may be authorized by the client to act on the client's behalf for purposes of establishing the VCPR with the veterinarian.
So do we add that here? I mean, that's not in my document. This is the new document.
It's in your packet on page 6.
4826.01 C.
There's no definition of agent, but we've defined client because the client is the primary individual. We're concerned about creating the relationship with the veterinarian.
Yeah, mine just says agent to act on the client's behalf, so the wording you added just added the definition of client. Maybe I have the wrong document, but.
No, I think.
Say 4826.01 C.
Right.
I think
the agent, I'm just reorganizing the words in this phrase.
Okay.
Which is the agent is authorized by the client to act on the client's behalf for purposes of establishing the VCPR.
So is that wording in there or not going to be in there?
No, she's just trying to, I think,
explain.
she's defining agent for you based on the words in here is what, yeah.
Okay.
So I don't think it's specifically defined. I think when we were talking about this yesterday, there was a discussion of how that is understood in the legal profession, and is something that is already kind of understood and didn't need to be defined per se, but I could be, am I saying?
I think that was my question, was are we going to stick with the discussion yesterday about using the definition, and because we change it up in H, we take away representative and put agent in there, and I just was curious.
And I think that was just to be sort of consistent through, yeah,
okay.
Yeah. Any other questions, comments? Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you.
So now we're on page 6, 4826.01. This is largely copied from CCR section 2032.1, the VCPR language, with revisions as follows. Subdivision A, the proposal would maintain the VCPR requirement under federal law and existing regs of 2032.1 for a veterinarian to establish a VCPR before prescribing, dispensing, or administering a drug, medicine, application, or treatment to an animal patient. Proposed sections subsection 3 would include the informed client consent provision, which was approved by the board in January 30th, 2020. Section B would maintain the provisions of 2032.1 subsection B2 and restructure the provisions to clarify the animal knowledge can be satisfied by recently examining the animal, or if the animal is a member of a herd being treated prophylactically to prevent disease or treated as a group for routine husbandry procedures by making medically appropriate and timely visits to the premises on which the herd is kept. Subsection C, the proposal will establish the client ability to authorize an agent to act on the client's behalf to establish a VCPR with the veterinarian. This provision is intended to resolve CVMA's concern that the owner of the animal may have delegated animal treatment authority to a trainer or barn manager. Subsection D, the proposal would maintain the existing VCPR exemption in the absence of a client communication. This is the same as 2032.15, subsection B2. Subsection E, the proposal would maintain the existing prohibition on establishing a VCPR solely by telephone or electronic means. Again, 2032.1, subsection E. Subsection F, the proposal would maintain the existing VCPR exemption for wild animals and unknown owners, and which is 2032.1, subsection A, and include the exemption for rabies vaccinations approved by the board on July 20th, 2022. Subsection G, the proposal would maintain the existing VCPR exemption in the absence of the originally prescribing veterinarian, 2032.25. So you can see that the vast majority of this is taking our regs and moving them to statute and reorganizing them, making them in one place. That's a pretty good hunk. Do you want to discuss that?
Sure. Does anyone have any questions on, yes, Tara.
This is a question for Dr. Sullivan. If you recall, in our discussions of the RVT CPR proposed rulemaking that is being reviewed later under 6F, the regulations unit second level reviewer, Christy Shields, proposed revisions to the existing, or the rabies vaccine exemption that was previously approved by the board. For your convenience, you can take a look at agenda item 6F, attachment 2, page 8. So the revision there says, rabies vaccines are prophylactically administered to the animal to prevent disease or loss of life. And I'm wondering if it would be appropriate to model the rabies vaccine exemption in the proposed legislation after what Ms. Shields proposed for the regulation. Does that regulation language make it more clear why treating an animal with a rabies vaccine does not require a VCPR? Right now, the language is
in the interest of protecting
public health. Yeah, pretty simple. Hers is to prevent disease or loss of life.
I think Dr. Nolan has something to add.
I'm sorry, but we don't have page numbers on this that was just emailed to us, so I'm lost. I'm not sure where you actually are. I can't read, I can't see page numbers or anything, so I'm having a hard time catching up to you, if you don't mind.
So the page numbers would be the same that we're talking about right now. So what you have in your original packet is the same that we're discussing.
I think because we're in a little bit of a pickle here trying to follow along, and
yeah, I'm sorry,
apologize. I'm in the same boat. We have been emailed a document, thank you, which is very helpful, but on this document, I don't believe there's any page numbers, so us looking.
So you want us to go back to the
Yeah, so if you go back to the original document.
Got it, I can do that.
Okay.
Just wasn't sure where you were.
Sorry about that.
And then I think we're also looking at a second document, if I'm correct.
Yeah, so she jumped to agenda item 6F.
Mm-hmm.
And on page 8 of that document, that's where she's pulling the different verbiage. But Tara.
So can we maybe have a second just so that they can, we'll 1 second here. Do you want to let us? Are you guys okay to go on?
I'm trying to find the email.
You know, by the way, I didn't get the email.
Yeah.
It said it.
Don't worry, sorry.
Here, I can forward it to you too.
It might be just easier if I describe the language in the reg proposal, and Jeff could type it into the ledge proposal so you could just see what it could look like versus what it currently looks like. Would that help? Just have one
We
page.
can't see it, so it probably won't help. Sorry, just to be honest.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so,
so maybe I could describe it. I'm thinking about changing in the interest of protecting public health.
See it.
I mean, if you want to get up and look at it, if that'll help.
We're on now the original document or the one that was emailed? I thought we were.
We're on the original.
Yeah, I'm fine.
But Tara's also referring to a document that's also posted for 6F. She's taking verbiage from that and putting it in here.
Right.
so we'll get up and look at it.
Yeah.
Let's just get up and take a look at the verbiage.
All right, Jeff, if you're ready. On page 7, subsection F. At the end of public health, just start typing these words. Like, don't worry about striking anything at this point. So after public health, insert are prophylactically should I just go over there and type it in? Yeah.
No, Jeff has it.
Okay, so the language you have in front of you now shows alternative language. And so instead of saying rabies vaccination in the interest of protecting public health, you could instead use or receiving a rabies vaccination prophylactically. I gotta turn to that page. to the animal to prevent disease or loss of life. Is protecting public health unclear? Is it more clear using prophylactically administered to prevent disease or loss of life? Okay.
We need that language to get it through the part that's in regs through it, so we're just suggesting that we put it in this section for consistency's sake.
Do you need, Dr. Sullivan, do you need
Yes, okay, so it would be striking in the interest of protecting public health.
What's the other end?
Huh? And then it would, the section would continue.
So Jeff, can you strike through that language, please? Thank you.
Prophylactically. So it's not R, strike R before prophylactic administration.
But it's an old one.
I'm right, so far mine's fine.
Okay, are there any concerns with the current language as it reads?
I like it.
Okay.
All right, should I open this up to public comment or just keep going?
No, let's finish this section.
Okay.
There's quite a bit there.
All right, public comment in the room. Public comment online, please.
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen or use the raise hand function. And it looks like we do have a request for comment from Barbara Schmitz. Oh, and looks like we have a couple comments, so we'll go in the order that they were received. First, we have Barbara Schmitz. Barbara, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak and a 15-second warning. Please click the unmute me button when the prompt appears on your device.
I'm here on behalf of the San Francisco SPCA. The SPCA is celebrating our 155th anniversary this year. We're a sheltering organization, and we do have a significant percentage of our staff who are veterinary professionals and staff that care for and treat our shelter animals, as well as clinics where we treat community members' animals. We do have concerns with the bill proposal relating to telemedicine. There are several concerns that I'll just kind of briefly outline here. First of all, the concern that I want to mention is this proposal does not mesh with the Assembly Business and Professions Committee's recommendations on joint oversight. This dates back to an oversight hearing in March 2021, and the recommendations regarding telehealth indicated, should existing law be amended to increase access to veterinary services via telehealth? VMB needs to advise if there are statutory changes that could facilitate increased access to telehealth services. So this proposal really does not achieve that. It actually does the opposite. And the concern that we have is that the impact will be to restrict telemedicine at actually the worst time, when the need for more tools in a veterinarian's tool belt is so great. And so that leads me to the second concern, and this is a little bit more of a contextual concern, and that is we are facing a crisis level shortage of veterinarians in the state right now. The level of overwhelm is reflected in a statewide survey of animal shelters that our organization just completed. The results are being compiled by the university that helped us administer the survey. But the survey results indicate there are many, many thousands of people and animals who are being impacted by the shortage of vets. And so, for example, one of the key things that came forward from the raw data that I have seen is that the number one issues that animal shelters and therefore their surrounding communities are facing is a lack of veterinarians. This is a statewide issue. And if you think about it, we're matriculating about 250 vets a year in California. And that's, you know, to help the vets currently who are working with our population of 40 million people. And what that means is that there are veterinary deserts in this state. Telemedicine is a tool that can help fill
15
that
seconds.
tremendous gap. Thank you. For example, UC Davis just released data on the stress of in-person visits versus online visits for cats. And the reason I mention that is that the data in this field is evolving, and it's evolving quickly. And so one of the things that we're doing in order to help fill the gap is we have a partnership with shelters and communities that are in the veterinary deserts in California. We actually have veterinarians on the ground today doing a high volume, high quality spay-neuter event in one of those veterinary deserts. And that supports animals that are coming in from the public, from the community, as well as those shelter animals. And finally, another concern that I want to mention is I'm very concerned, and we're very concerned about the lack of input and transparency in this process. We're concerned about the lack of notice and input before this bill proposal actually was pitched to state lawmakers. I worry that there, you know, has there been any meaningful input from stakeholders? The language that you're proposing seems to be based on something from a year and a half ago. Has that been reflected to, updated to reflect new data? Has it been updated to reflect the worsening shortage of
Ma'am,
vets?
this is the moderator. Unfortunately, time is up.
Well, I urge you to please pause this telemedicine bill proposal, obtain some current data, get current stakeholder input, and redefine the policy approach and goals. Thanks.
All right, this is the moderator. We'll move on to our next individual who has requested public comment. Individual identified as Brittany Benessi. And Brittany, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak and a 15-second warning. Please click the unmute me button when the prompt appears on your device.
I'm speaking today also with regard to the telemedicine components as well as the VCPR regulations within the proposed legislation.
We can't.
Telemedicine benefits a wide range of people.
Can we have Ms. Bennett start over, please? We couldn't hear the beginning of her statement.
Oh, yes. Are you able to hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. I'll restart your timer.
Thank you so much. I'm speaking today also with regard to telemedicine as well as the VCPR components of the proposed legislation and coming to you on behalf of the American Society of the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. Telemedicine benefits a wide range of people and pets, including anxious pets, large animals, and those living in remote and underserved areas. Establishing in statute the regulations that keep veterinarians from practicing medicine or prescribing medication unless they have recently examined the animal, a difficult and often unnecessary obstacle for many pet owners, especially at a time when, as referenced, there is a significant shortage of vets, would stall one of the most promising tools in the Access to Care toolkit. And as you know, access to care is an ongoing hardship for many Californian pet owners. In 2020, the AVMA estimated that over 50 million pets, approximately 1/3, do not see a vet at least once a year. A national study also showed that 40% of low-income owners who had to rehome their pets reported that access to affordable vet care would have helped them keep their animal. Similar to the concerns just voiced by the SF-SPCA, our state shelters are struggling with overcrowding and pet owners are having difficulty finding pets, getting appointments, and affording care. If there was ever a time to utilize all possible avenues, it is now. During the tightest restrictions of the COVID-19 pandemic, telemedicine was essential to ensuring pets' health care. The use of veterinary telehealth showed its potential to significantly improve animal welfare across the geographic as well as economic spectrums, a promising opportunity to improve outcomes for pets and their families. We want to recognize and express gratitude for the board's work to address access to care issues in the state, but this bill as proposed would not offer any solutions to the crisis. Rather, it would place into statute stringent limitations on the use of telemedicine and reduce veterinary access for all clients who have difficulty, whether due to age or disability, animal behavior, or geographic location, in making it to an in-person physical examination. Putting energy and resources toward a law that will ultimately curtail promising tools at a time when we should be exploring every pathway to improve access to care will further hinder veterinary access for Californians. I respectfully ask that you reconsider this proposed legislation in its current form and refrain from advancing it this year. Thank you so much.
All right, this is the moderator. Appears there are no further requests for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Jessica.
Oh. Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate a couple things from the memo and what Dr. Sullivan has already stated regarding the legislative proposal specific to the telemedicine definitions in there. The intent of this proposal was not to expand scope at all. It was to clarify that what is already allowed under existing law. So as members may recall from the July 2021 meeting, where they reviewed the legislative proposal from the MDC, and the subcommittee at the time was Christy Pulaski and Dr. Sullivan. When they were looking at ways to increase access, and we had the conversation surrounding telemedicine, a lot of the public comment the board received, there were a lot of examples that they thought they could not do under existing law, and a lot of those things that they said they could not do, they could actually do. And so what the MDC and then the board subsequently found is that a lot of those things, by making these definitions in statute, it'll make it much more clear that they can do those things. And so thereby this would increase access that way, because veterinarians would feel more comfortable using telemedicine in these ways that they are already allowed to do. So the board at the time approved this because they believed that this was increasing, it will result in increased care. But again, it's not to expand the scope, it's to essentially codify what's already allowed under current law.
And if I may, just piggybacking off of that, and then also what was said by the public comment, I think that's kind of like the point that the commentators were making, was that while I understand that what we're doing is helping clarify what can be done that veterinarians thought couldn't be done before, what I'm hearing also from the commentators is that by clarifying that and codifying that, it's almost limiting then what could be expanded possibly in the future to create more access to care. And what I'm hearing is that there could be, given that, you know, despite the emergency period ends at the end of February, we're still seeing all the repercussions and getting data as to what could be possible and what further advances we can make with telemedicine and how we can create a bigger scope of what can be perhaps done. And so it's like, I think what the comment is asking us to do is to take that into consideration and perhaps it's guidelines instead that we put out as to what veterinarians can do, versus at this moment codifying it in legislation, knowing that perhaps there's an opportunity to be able to make legislation that is more expansive to allow more access to care. I hope that made sense.
Yes, I totally understand what you're saying and what the other side is seeking. I would just remind the board that when it comes to any kind of scope expansions, that's typically carried by associations, by outside stakeholders, and the board can engage in any kind of legislation that might be proposed to expand scope, but typically the board doesn't address scope expansion. That's the associations and other stakeholders. This was very narrow to clarify what they can already do. And I think that they had concerns about the VCPR itself. They want to look at, making that so it's not condition specific. They want to make it so that 12 months goes to 18 months like we did in COVID. Those would essentially be expanding what was already existing and something that they may want to look at getting an author for.
So I guess I have a question related to that. Is there a reason why the telehealth guidelines that we've already looked at are included in this package, in addition to the herd and all of that? Is there a reason why all of this was put into one package?
Yes. So what we have in existing regs right now caused some confusion. So it was suggested when we were discussing this that where they needed to be, since they are definitions, would be in that section 48, whatever it is. So that would make it more clear, and so we could then better define the expanded services of a veterinarian by up to and including diagnosing a case over the phone to decide the urgency of it. So that was totally misunderstood in the profession, and I think legally, that the veterinarian had to handle the case before they could even talk to the client. That's not the case. It wasn't the case. So we're moving it to statute to be more clear and put it in the proper location along with the coexisting VCPR definitions. And there's been a great study done recently, and Dr. Miller knows it a lot better than I, about underserved areas. I think the Access to Care Task Force looked at it. And the two most prominent, and this is funded by the Mandy Foundation, done at the University of Tennessee, and the two areas that were found to be in need of low-income areas were wellness exams and urgency cases, both of which need to be seen by a veterinarian. Wellness exams, the big part of that are vaccinations to prevent disease and rabies control. You can't do that with telemedicine. And urgent care, being hit by a car, cat abscess, those things need to be handled in a clinic setting. So I understand what they're coming from, but some of the latest data suggests that we're on the right track. We're expanding the use of diagnosing and then determining what the best course is from there. And if it's prescribing or a specific treatment, that is done within a hospital setting or a farm setting. So we're not ignoring this issue. And by addressing it this way, we're making it more clear to the licensees, and we're recognizing that we are expanding services from what they were understood previously.
Can I just want to add real quick for clarification. The telemedicine package was approved by the board back in July 2021. The reason it's back before you right now is just because the VCPR proposal amends the same definition section under the Business and Professions Code. So since they're already proposed to have multiple changes to that definition section, everything has been combined. But also, if we can have it all move in one bill efficiently, that actually benefits California consumers because we've got better definitions of different types of telehealth services, which helps consumers. We still have to maintain telemedicine as the practice of veterinary medicine, which requires an initial examination under federal law to prescribe any medication. We have to maintain that. That's not something we can ignore. And we don't want to create a situation where veterinarians are complying with the Veterinary Medicine Practice Act, which, creates an exemption from the exam, but then they're, not complying with federal law on those requirements. So anyway, that's why both packages are in one, because they're amending the same sections.
The other reason we put it in definitions was because if you read the literature and read the paper, telehealth and telemedicine are interchanged all the time. So for our situation, we wanted to define telemedicine as the ability to diagnose and have a general conversation, but telemedicine is the is the treatment and prescribing and treating, which has to be, is the actual medicine part of it.
Yes,
That's what, but, yes.
yeah, and I appreciate that. I wanted to make it clear to everyone because it wasn't 100% clear to me why we were combining it. And thank you, both of you, for clarifying that. Are there any? Yes, Dr. Felicity,
and I just wanted to say I really appreciate the definitions because it makes it really clear. We do have access to care is something that's very important, for a lot of us. And sometimes we misunderstand the intentions of providing definitions like this. So what I just wanted to establish is that by providing this definition, it does not remove the ability or the access of a client for patient care, even if it could be more of guidance that they would get by accessing a consult with a veterinary professional, be a vet or an RVT, but does not really allow the practitioner to diagnose and provide what you call this treatment if they have not really have a first-hand relationship with the patient, not having handled the case, but having that guidance through teletriage and telehealth. Because I just wanted to put it in the context of by having these definitions, it's basically just guidance. I want to make sure that, because that is what we experience, out there. In the county, we have a medical helpline that we use, and that is what we do. We talk to constituents who call us describing what they see in their patients, but us knowing that we cannot diagnose what your patient is really, or what the problem is. So what we try to do is to guide them on what the next steps are, and even having the conversation of the patient may be at the end stage of life, that the urgency of it, you need to go to emergency, or you could just go ahead and set up an appointment with your general practitioner. So I think these definitions really help. And at first, when we started talking about this, I was actually a little concerned about limiting the access. But actually, I think with this definition, the way that it is written, I think it really is going to give us guidance and preventing professionals, veterinary professionals who does not know how to regulate themselves into, with their intent, blinding them as to how they're practicing their medicine. So I would say I see the need for the access to care, but I think this definitions is definitely helping us. The only concern that I have is that if we are going to put this in legislation and everything, I just hope that we really think about, is this going to limit our ability or a veterinarian's ability to practice, to help more people through telehealth, telemedicine, teletriage. That's all.
So I think you actually are a really good example of why these are important, because you actually can diagnose based on this. Now, the telehealth, it allows for a veterinarian to see a patient through telephonic or electronic means and actually diagnose the patient. So you're allowed to do that. And because people didn't know they could, including yourself, this is going to help people to know, actually, we can do that. And that is going to be very helpful, I think, moving forward. Also, I just wanted to, this is not changing the law. It's, if anything, opening it up a little bit with the diagnosed, but we can't change the scope anyway. It's going to be through statute that changes the scope. So if somebody wanted to change the scope, this doesn't limit that in my understanding of the law. This just is clarifying, codifying, and then it would take legislation to change the scope of practice anyway. So I don't think that by having this here, it's going to limit anything, because we would never be able to, as a board, just change the how a VCPR is established, is my understanding of things. I'm looking over at Dr. Miller because he usually is shaking his head if I'm thinking.
Well, so both of these would be legislation. So this is legislation we're proposing, but it's not proposing to expand the scope. So if outside stakeholders want a piece of legislation that expands scope, they're welcome to pursue that, and then we can interact.
But we wouldn't be able to do that.
But we wouldn't sponsor a bill that expands scope.
Dr. Bradbury, could I make a comment as well? It's Jennifer.
Yes.
I just wanted to echo the sentiments of Drs. Bradbury and Solicito. I know at the MDC meeting yesterday, when we were discussing one of these terms quite extensively, I don't remember which one, a comment was made that I think everybody in this room understands that. And several of us have said this before, it's not about everybody in this room understanding it, it's about everybody else who's reading it, understanding it. So I agree, we're not trying to expand, but we're also not trying to restrict the scope. And I think clarifying this language really does make it easier for everybody who is not in this room or on the webcast to understand it.
Thank you, and thank you for speaking up.
Are we in a portion where we can make comments?
Yes.
So my comment is, number one, in response to your question, I'm not sure about how a scope expansion would be viewed, if it would even be viewed as a scope expansion. That's an interesting question. But what I can say is, in relation to these definitions are really probably not as controversial as is some of the other sections of the law relating to telemedicine specifically, so 4826.6. The definitions are of great value because there are variations of these definitions across the country, and what we find is there are companies that are based in other places that are telling veterinarians, well, you can do this, you can do that, but in California, we don't really have a very clear definition of what does it mean to be doing teletriage, what does it mean to be doing telehealth. Because these definitions will now be here, that will be of great value, and it will serve for consumer protection because it will be very clear in this state, this is how we do it. So the definitions themselves are not very controversial. I think that there are some that might disagree that telemedicine can only be, there are some that disagree with the idea that telemedicine is only provided after you have an in-person exam, but the fact is that is just a reflection of our regulations. And all we're doing is moving regulations into statute, and that regulation, 2032.1, the VCPR language, is the cornerstone of veterinary practice. That is almost identical throughout the United States of America. So if there was ever a regulation that could be moved into statute, it would be that one, because that regulation is what we use to base all of how we practice medicine on. And so there is no one that I know of. Do you know of any other states that have not required an in-person exam of the animal? There are other states that have.
Yeah. 5. I think Virginia, New Jersey. I read Michigan. I'm not sure that's in law yet. I think Oregon has a pretty loose definition.
All right. So what we're doing here is we're defining what does it mean in California. And so that's a reflection of our VCPR language in our regulations. That's been discussed extensively in the past and currently, not only among the leadership within the CVMA, but also here at the board. So those definitions, I think, are of great value. They're not really what is a threat. It's moreover, what we want to do with telemedicine pursuant to 4826.6.
Any other questions on this part from the board? comments? Nobody up there. Okay, Dr. Sullivan, I think you can continue.
Yes, so 4826.6. This legislative proposal includes the previously board-approved telemedicine provisions. The subcommittee also proposes technical amendments to subdivision B2 to remove and replace client's representative with agent to conform with the new use of agent in the legislative proposal. Let's see, and then section 4829.1, the proposal would maintain the existing one-year prescription limitation and define a drug and regulate and a definition of drug, which is in our present regulations 2032.1 subsection C and D. And let's see, I think I just have a couple more. Section 4875.1, since the VCPR regulatory provisions would be moved to statute, all references to the VCPR regulation, which would be repealed in a subsequent rulemaking, would need to reflect the new VCPR statute. Accordingly, section 4875.1 subdivision A7 would be updated to remove and replace 2032.1 with 4826.01. And then the last one is kind of general cleanup language. Future regulatory proposals to repeal VCPR regulations. As discussed above, the existing VCPR regulations as revised are proposed to codify in statute in the subcommittee's legislative proposal. If the VCPR legislative proposal is enacted, the subcommittee will recommend the VCPR regulation 2032.1, 2032.15, and 2032.25 be repealed. In addition, the committee would recommend a conforming amendment to CCR Title 16, Section 2038.5 to remove and replace the citations to Section 2032.1 and 2032.15 with the new VCPR statutory section 4826.01. Subcommittee would recommend this rulemaking be submitted as a Section 100 rulemaking, as it would merely reflect the new statutes, making the existing regulations redundant and outdated. Okay. So it starts with, the discussion starts with 4826.6.
Any comments from the board?
And basically, these are existing regulations with a couple of modifications.
Okay. I don't see any board members online raising their hands. Any public comment in the room? Don't see any. Moderator, would you please open it up for public comment online?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen or use the raise hand function. And it looks like we do have a request from Barbara Schmitz. And Barbara, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak and a 15-second warning. Please click the unmute me button when the prompt appears on your device.
Hi, this is Barbara Schmitz on behalf of the San Francisco SPCA again. First of all, I want to thank you for the discussion. I do appreciate and have heard the comments that were made. I do want to make sure that you all understand that in spite of the discussion, we do have the same concerns. And I will just echo a little bit of the phraseology that was used, because I think that it is pretty close to articulating quickly some of the concerns that we have. And one of the comments that was made is that the folks who spoke out against the regulations, myself and others, that our concern is that we need to create something with a bigger scope. and that there is a concern that enshrining this in statute as it's currently written will limit access to telemedicine. And why not create guidelines instead? And so that is one of the things I just want to point out, and that is if the intent is to clarify misperceptions on the part of veterinarians in the community now, guidelines or updating the FAQs would be a great way to address those concerns, educate and clarify for vets who are in practice. Going the route of enshrining something in statute, codifying it, that takes a lot of time and effort, and typically there's a motivation there. And so I'm not as concerned about the motivation for why the bill proposal has come forward. I am worried about the impact. That is the concern that our organization has, and we do remain concerned, and just want to make sure that we clarify that, since there was some discussion after we articulated our concerns originally. So thanks.
All right, this is a moderator. Appears there are no further requests for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Dr. Nolan.
I recall going through the discussions of the definitions at length and whatnot. I apologize, maybe I'm just getting too old, but I don't recall us going through the discussion of the 4826.6 or the 4826.01. Was that a part of that whole definition package? And I just don't remember that discussion. It was. All that verbiage was, so there's no new verbiage in this.
And you could probably pull up the July 2021 meeting minutes.
Okay. So the only changes are the ones in green that from the previous discussion that we had back in July.
I believe that's correct.
A few minor changes, but.
Right. The changes to the telemedicine provisions that are made in this proposal are identified, and it's just to change representative to agent. Nothing else has been revised from that telemedicine package the board approved in 2021.
I don't have a copy with me now, but I'll get you one where I have reference to what regulation that each of these sections come from. And for some reason, I don't have it with me. I can't put my fingers on it.
On the attached document, in the comments in green, say where each one of them come from.
Okay. Oh, okay. Which I can't read.
All right. Do we have a motion?
And just so, Dr. Nolan, if you do want to look at what was previously proposed to the board in July of 2021 on the memo, there's a hyperlink in that discussion that takes you right to that from July.
Again, I think I remember a lot of detail about the definitions. I don't remember us discussing at great length the other verbiage. Could be because I thought some of it was already in statute already, and it's not, obviously. It's all new, so my bad.
Okay. Does anybody want to entertain a motion?
I would, except I don't recall what the language is anymore.
It's on page 4 of your meeting materials for this agenda item.
Okay.
And it would be as amended.
As amended today. So I'd like to make a motion to submit the legislative proposal to the, that's what I'm doing, right, California State Legislature to amend sections 4825.1 of Article 2 and 4875.1 of Article 4 and add sections 4826.01, 4826.6, 4829.1 to Article 2, Chapter 11, Division 2 of the Business and Professions Code as amended today.
I'll second. Okay, I think we have to open this back up to, do you guys want to make it, okay. We'll open it back up to public comment in the room. None. Online, please.
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen or use the raise hand function. And I'll go ahead and pause a moment to allow the public time to access these features and submit their requests. All right, and seeing none, would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Let's go for the vote.
Dr. Solicito?
Yes.
Ms. Bowler?
Aye.
Ms. Laredo?
Yes.
Dr. Noland?
Yes.
Ms. Prado?
Abstain.
Ms. Berber?
Yes.
Dr. Bradbury?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. Well, that was shorter than the discussion yesterday. We've definitely discussed this quite a bit. We've been going for a little while here, so we're going to take a 10-minute break and come back at 2:35.